Hello, friends. Welcome to the Sleep Aliens. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever heard your own name when no one else was around? Not in your head, but really heard it, echoing off the canyon walls at 3 in the morning? That's what happened to Elena Brooks, and what she experienced that night in southern Utah would change everything she thought she knew about being alone in the desert. Marshall Tate had been working as a park ranger at Canyon Echo Point for about 11 years. In this area surrounded by red rock formations, he had seen many strange things: missing visitors, wild animals behaving oddly, weather conditions that seemed illogical. But nothing he had seen had prepared him for the call he received on October 14th. Elena was a landscape photographer from Denver. She'd driven 6 hours to catch the famous red rock formations at sunrise, planning to camp overnight at one of the designated spots near the canyon rim. The area was known for its acoustics. Sound traveled in weird ways through those narrow passages, bouncing off sandstone walls that had been carved by wind and water over millions of years. She'd set up her tent just before sunset, watching the rocks turn from orange to crimson to deep purple as the light faded. The October air was crisp, perfect for hiking. She'd done this dozens of times before in different locations. She knew the protocols, had all the right gear, and had checked in with the ranger station like she was supposed to. Around 9 p.m., she decided to scout some locations for the morning shoot. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to see by without a flashlight, though she carried one anyway. The trail she followed was well marked, leading along the canyon rim toward a formation called the Three Sisters, 3 tall pillars of stone that stood like sentinels against the sky. The desert was quiet in that particular way it gets at night. Not silent. You could hear insects, the occasional rustle of something small moving through brush, the wind sliding over stone. But it was a clean kind of quiet, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. She'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when she heard it. Elena, just her name, clear as day. A woman's voice, she thought, though it was hard to tell with the echo. She stopped walking. Her hand went to the flashlight on her belt, but she didn't turn it on yet. Hello? Nothing, just the wind. She started walking again, slower now, listening hard. Probably just another hiker, maybe someone who'd seen her at the ranger station earlier. People were friendly out here. But something about it felt off. The voice hadn't sounded like it was calling to her. It sounded like someone just saying her name, testing it out. 5 minutes later, it happened again. Elena. Closer this time. Or maybe farther away? The acoustics made it impossible to tell. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Who's there?" She called out louder now. "This isn't funny." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. She realized she'd stopped hearing the normal night sounds. No insects, no wind, just her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. That's when she saw the lights. 3 of them. High up, maybe a quarter-mile away, positioned above the canyon's edge, near where the Three Sisters formation stood. They weren't moving. They weren't flickering. They just hung there in the air, perfectly still. Each one a sphere of white light about the size of a basketball, if you could judge distance properly in the dark. Elena had seen drones before. She'd seen helicopters, planes, satellites, the International Space Station. These weren't any of those things. They were too still, too bright, and too perfectly positioned in a triangle formation, and they cast no light on the ground below them. That's what struck her most. these brilliant white lights that somehow didn't illuminate anything else. Her photographer's brain kicked in automatically. She pulled out her camera, adjusted the settings for night photography, and aimed at the lights. Through the viewfinder, they looked exactly the same. No lens flare, no distortion. Just 3 perfect spheres of white light. She took maybe a dozen shots before she noticed something else. The lights were getting brighter, not moving closer, just intensifying like someone was slowly turning up a dimmer switch. And as they got brighter, the silence around her seemed to deepen. That's when the fear really hit her. It wasn't rational fear, the kind that makes you check over your shoulder or grip your bear spray. This was something deeper, more primal. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She just stood there on that trail, camera hanging from her neck, watching those 3 lights grow brighter and brighter until she had to squint to look at them. Then she heard the sound. It started low, so low she felt it in her chest more than heard it with her ears. A humming, a vibration that seemed to come up through the stone beneath her feet. It made her teeth ache. It made her vision blur slightly, and underneath that hum was something else. A rhythm, maybe, or a pattern. Like machinery, but organic somehow. Like breathing. Elena. The voice again. But this time it wasn't bouncing off canyon walls. It was inside her head. She was certain of it. The voice was coming from inside her own mind. That broke the paralysis. She turned and ran. She didn't look back, didn't stop to see if the lights were following her. She just ran, her boots pounding on the packed earth trail, her breath coming in gasps. The camera bounced against her chest. The flashlight beam jerked wildly as she fumbled to turn it on. The trail back to her campsite felt 3 times as long as it had on the way out. Every shadow looked wrong. Every sound made her flinch. And that humming, she could still feel it, even as she put distance between herself and those lights. It was in her bones now, resonating through her skeleton. When she finally reached her tent, she didn't go inside. She went straight to her truck, threw her camera and pack in the passenger seat, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty campsite, the red rock walls rising up on either side. Everything looked normal. Everything looked wrong. She drove. The ranger station was 15 miles away on a winding dirt road. She pushed the truck faster than was safe, sending up plumes of dust, her high beams picking out the twists and turns. Halfway there, her phone got signal for the first time in hours. She didn't call anyone. She just kept driving. Marshal Tate was working the night shift, catching up on paperwork in the small station building, when he saw the headlights approaching too fast. He was already standing up, reaching for his radio, when the truck skidded to a stop in the parking area. Elena practically fell out of the driver's side. In the station's floodlights, Marshall could see she was pale, shaking, her eyes too wide. "Ma'am, you all right?" She stared at him for a moment, like she was trying to remember how to talk. Then, "There's something out there, near the 3 sisters. I can't." Marshall had done this job long enough to know real fear when he saw it. Whatever had scared this woman, it wasn't a spider or a snake. He guided her inside, sat her down, got her some water. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the cup. "Take your time," he said, pulling up a chair across from her. "Start from the beginning." So she told him, the voice calling her name. The 3 lights, the humming that seemed to come up through the ground. The voice in her head. She told it all in a rush, watching his face for signs that he thought she was crazy. But Marshall's expression never changed. He just listened, nodding occasionally, his weathered face neutral. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that made her blood run cold. "What time did you first hear your name?" Around 9:15, I think. Maybe 9:20. Why? Marshall stood up and walked to a wall map of the park. His finger traced the trail Elena had described, then moved to another section. Because you're the third person this month to report something near the Three Sisters. First one was October 6th. Second, solo hiker, male, 34 years old. Reported seeing lights and hearing his name called. Came back the next day with his girlfriend to show her where it happened. Found his campsite torn apart, tent shredded, food scattered, no animal tracks anywhere. Elena felt her stomach drop. And the second person? October 8th, couple from California. They were night hiking, anniversary tradition, they said. Both heard a woman's voice calling for help near the Three Sisters formation. When they went to investigate, they found nothing. But their GPS units both failed. Compass went haywire. They got turned around so bad they didn't make it back to their car until dawn. Both swear they were only lost for maybe an hour. But they'd been gone for 7. 7 hours? Missing time, Marshall said quietly. He turned back to look at her. Neither of them could account for it. Just gone. Elena stood up, her legs still unsteady. You're saying this has happened before? Here? At this park? Marshall's jaw tightened. Not officially. Can't be official unless someone files a formal report, and most people don't want to. They think... He trailed off. They think people will assume they're crazy. Yeah? But you believe me. Marshall walked back to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. He set it down in front of Elena and opened it. Inside were incident reports, handwritten notes, photographs. Lots of photographs. This goes back 30 years, Marshall said. My predecessor kept these files separate from the main system. Called them the Echo Files. He briefed me on them my first week, made me promise to keep track, keep it quiet, keep people safe. Elena leafed through the papers. Report after report. Lights in the sky, voices calling names. Lost time. Strange burns or marks appearing on people's bodies with no explanation. Equipment failures, compass malfunctions, and photographs, dozens of them, showing similar lights to what she'd seen. Different years, different witnesses, same phenomenon. Why isn't this public? Lena asked. Why isn't this being investigated? It was, back in the 90s. Some folks from a university came out, set up equipment, stayed for 3 months. They recorded electromagnetic anomalies, unexplained radiation signatures, acoustic phenomena that shouldn't exist in this environment. Then their funding got pulled. The equipment got packed up, the data disappeared. Disappeared? Marshall shrugged. That's what I was told. Maybe it's all sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere. Maybe it got lost, or maybe... He didn't finish that thought. Elena sat back down, her mind racing. So what do I do? I can't just leave my equipment out there. My tent, my gear, that's thousands of dollars worth of stuff. You don't go back alone, Marshall said firmly. Not at night. If you want, I can drive out there with you tomorrow morning. We'll get your things and you can be on your way. What if it happens again? What if those lights come back? Marshall's expression softened. Then we deal with it. But Elena... He leaned forward, his voice low and serious. If you do see them again, don't try to interact. Don't call out to them. Don't follow them. And whatever you do, don't let them separate you from me. Stay in sight at all times. Understood? Elena nodded, even though she didn't fully understand. The rational part of her brain was still trying to explain this away. Weather balloons, military aircraft, mass hallucination. But the fear in her gut told her a different story. She spent the rest of the night in the ranger station's break room, lying on a sagging couch, not sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard that voice, Elena. Not quite her mother's voice, not quite her sister's. Something in between, something that knew her. At 5:30 a.m., Marshall knocked on the door. "Sun's coming up. You ready?" She wasn't, but she followed him outside anyway. They took Marshall's Park Service truck, a sturdy four-wheel drive vehicle equipped with radios, emergency supplies, and what Elena noticed with a chill was a shotgun mounted behind the seats. "Standard equipment," Marshall said when he saw her looking at it. "Bears mostly, sometimes mountain lions." But his tone suggested those weren't the only reasons. The drive back to her campsite took 20 minutes. The morning light was just starting to paint the canyon walls gold and orange. In daylight, the landscape looked completely different. Majestic, peaceful, beautiful. It was hard to reconcile this serene setting with the terror she'd felt the night before. When they reached the campsite, Elena's breath caught. Her tent was still there, but the stakes had been pulled out on one side, causing it to collapse partially. Her camp chair was overturned. The fire ring she'd carefully built had been disturbed, stones scattered in a pattern that looked almost deliberate. Marshall stopped the truck but didn't immediately get out. He sat there, engine running, eyes scanning the area. "Stay close to me," he said finally. They approached the tent together. Elena's hands were shaking as she knelt down to open it. Inside, everything was exactly where she'd left it. Sleeping bag, pillow, book, water bottle. Nothing disturbed. "That's odd," Marshall murmured. "What?" "Usually, when animals get into a campsite, they're looking for food. They tear things apart, but this?" He gestured at the collapsed tent, the scattered stones. "This looks like something was looking for something specific, or someone." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "You think they came back? After I left?" "I don't know what to think." Marshall walked a slow circle around the campsite, studying the ground. No tracks, no footprints except yours from last night. But something was here. They packed up her gear quickly. Elena kept glancing over her shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. The morning shadows seemed too deep, too dark. The silence felt expectant, like the desert itself was holding its breath. "There," Marshall said suddenly, pointing. About 50 yards away, near the trail that led to the Three Sisters, something was reflecting the early sunlight. They walked toward it, and Elena felt her chest tighten. It was her flashlight, the one she'd had on her belt last night. She hadn't even realized she'd lost it. But it wasn't on the trail. It was positioned on a flat rock, standing upright, deliberately placed, and arranged around it in a perfect circle were 12 small stones, each one exactly the same size. Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I didn't do that." "I know you didn't," Marshall said. He pulled out his phone and took several photos. Then he carefully picked up the flashlight, examined it. "Works fine. Battery's still good?" He looked at her. "You said you had a camera last night?" "Yeah. I took pictures of the lights. You still have it?" Elena nodded, suddenly remembering. "In my truck. I threw it in when She didn't finish. They both turned and walked quickly back to her vehicle. Elena grabbed the camera and turned it on, her hands fumbling with the controls. She navigated to the photos from last night. There were 17 images. The first dozen showed the canyon landscape in twilight. Then came the photos of the lights. Except the lights weren't there. The Three Sisters formations were clearly visible in the shots, perfectly focused and exposed. The sky was dark above them, but where the three spheres of light should have been, there was nothing. Just empty sky. "That's impossible," Elena breathed. "I saw them. I photographed them. They were right there." Marshall took the camera, zoomed in on the images. Your camera's working fine. These are good photos. But the lights didn't show up. Elena felt like the ground was tilting under her feet. How is that possible? How can I see something with my own eyes, point a camera at it, and have it not appear in the photo? That's the question, isn't it? Marshall handed the camera back. The university researchers had the same problem. They set up infrared cameras, night vision equipment, everything. They'd see the lights with their own eyes, but on camera? Nothing. Or sometimes just interference patterns. Static. Elena scrolled through the rest of the photos and then she froze. Marshall. The last image on the camera wasn't one she remembered taking. It was a close-up shot, badly overexposed, mostly white. But in the center of all that brightness was a shape. Humanoid, but wrong, too tall, proportions all off. And where its face should be was just darkness. When did you take that? Marshall's voice had gone very quiet. I didn't. I swear I didn't take that photo. They stood there in the morning light, staring at an image that shouldn't exist. And Elena realized something that made her blood run cold. Whatever was out there in the desert, whatever had called her name and arranged stones in a perfect circle and left that photo on her camera, it wanted her to know it was real. The question was why. Marshall insisted Elena come back to the ranger station while he made some calls. She didn't argue. The campsite felt contaminated now, wrong in a way that sunlight couldn't fix. They loaded the rest of her gear into her truck, and she followed his vehicle back down the winding dirt road, checking her rearview mirror more often than necessary. At the station, Marshall made coffee, while Elena transferred the photos from her camera to her laptop. In the fluorescent lighting of the small office, everything felt more mundane, more manageable. But when she pulled up that last image, the one she didn't take, it still made her stomach clench. "Can I see it larger?" Marshall asked, leaning over her shoulder. Elena expanded the image to fill the screen. The overexposed white brightness dominated the frame, but now with more detail visible, they could see other things. Suggestions of shapes, what might have been a hand, fingers too long, reaching toward the camera, and that dark space where a face should be. It wasn't just an absence of light. It was a void, like looking into deep water at night. "I need to show you something else," Marshall said. He went to the filing cabinet and pulled out the Echo Files folder again, but this time he went deeper, pulling out a manila envelope from the very back. "Fair warning, this is going to be disturbing." He spread out 3 photographs on the desk. They were older, printed on photo paper that had yellowed slightly with age. Each showed a similar image to what was on Elena's camera. Overexposed brightness, humanoid shapes, that same sense of wrongness in the proportions. 1993, Marshall said, pointing to the first photo. Taken by a honeymooning couple. They woke up one morning and found 5 pictures on their camera they didn't remember taking. 1998, he indicated the second photo. Solo backpacker, male. He said he dropped his camera during the night, and when he found it the next day, the whole roll of film had been exposed, except for 3 frames. The third photo made Elena lean back involuntarily. It was clearer than the others, less overexposed. The figure was almost fully visible. Tall, thin, proportions all wrong. The head was elongated, the eyes just dark holes. The skin, if it was skin, looked smooth, almost luminous. 2003, Marshall said quietly. That one was taken by my predecessor, Jim Carver. He was out investigating reports of the lights, thought his camera malfunctioned. But when he got the film developed, Marshall tapped the photo. He told me he didn't sleep right for months after that. Elena looked up at him. "Where is Jim now? Can I talk to him?" Marshall's expression closed off. Jim passed away in 2009, heart attack. He was 56 years old, healthy as a horse. Happened 3 days after his last documented sighting. He gathered the photos back up. You see why I keep this quiet? You see why people don't want to talk about it? People need to know, Elena said. This is, Marshall, this is evidence, real evidence. We need to go to the media, to researchers, to who? Marshall interrupted, his voice sharper than before. The same university program that got shut down? The news outlets that'll turn it into a joke? The government agencies that have been denying this stuff exist for decades? He sat down heavily. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I've seen what happens when people try to make this public. They get discredited, harassed, sometimes worse. Worse how? Marshall didn't answer directly. Instead, he opened another file and showed her a missing persons report from 2001. Sarah Mitchell, age 29, experienced hiker. Last seen near the Three Sisters Formation. Search and rescue found her tent, her gear, her vehicle. Never found her. Official cause, accident, presumed dead, body not recovered, Marshall said. But Sarah's partner told me, off the record, that Sarah had been obsessed with the lights. She'd seen them twice and wanted to see them again. She thought she could communicate with them. Elena felt sick. You think the lights took her? I think Sarah went looking for something and found it. Marshall closed the file. I think whatever these things are, they're territorial or curious, or something else entirely that we don't have words for. But they're real, and they're dangerous, and they've been here a lot longer than we have. Elena stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched away in all directions, beautiful and empty, or seemingly empty. So, what do I do? Just leave? Pretend this didn't happen? That's what most people do. Is that what you'd do? Marshall was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. But I'm paid to be here. I'm paid to know what's out there. You're not. I'm a photographer, Elena said. I document things. That's what I do. She turned to face him. Those pictures on my camera, even if the lights didn't show up, I've got that last image. The one I didn't take. That's evidence. Evidence of what? That something weird happened? That's not enough. It's never enough. Then I'll get more. Marshall stood up abruptly. Elena, listen to me very carefully. I've been doing this job for 11 years. Before that, Jim did it for 23. Between us, we've documented over 60 incidents involving the lights. Know how many people have tried to actively investigate? To seek them out, interact with them, study them? 14. Know how many of those 14 had something bad happen, missing time, unexplained injuries, psychological trauma, or worse, all 14. You're trying to scare me off. I'm trying to keep you alive. Marshall's voice softened. Look, I get it. You want answers. You want to understand. So do I. But whatever these things are, they don't follow our rules. Time works differently around them. Space works differently. People report being in 2 places at once, seeing things that haven't happened yet, having memories that aren't theirs. It's not just scary, it's reality-breaking. Elena sat back down, processing this. The voice I heard, it knew my name. How would it know my name? That's another pattern, Marshall said. They always know names. Even if you've never been here before, even if there's no way they could know, they know. Some people think it's telepathy. Some think they're reading information somehow, like scanning, I don't know. But they know who you are. What do they want? If I knew that, this would all make a lot more sense. Elena pulled up the photograph on her laptop again, studying it. The longer she looked, the more detail seemed to emerge from the overexposed brightness. Were those symbols in the background? Or just artifacts from the image compression? Marshall, she said slowly. What if it's not random? What if they're trying to communicate? Communicate what? I don't know, but think about it. The stones arranged in a circle. The photograph they left on my camera. My flashlight placed deliberately, even calling my name. Maybe that's an attempt at contact. Marshall rubbed his face tiredly. Or maybe they're just playing with us, like a cat with a mouse. Maybe, but what if they're not? Before Marshall could respond, his radio crackled to life. Dispatch to Ranger Tate, come in. Marshall picked up the radio. Tate here, go ahead. We've got a report of lights near observation point. Hikers say they've been visible for the last 20 minutes. Multiple witnesses. Marshall and Elena locked eyes. Observation point was on the opposite end of the park from the Three Sisters, about 8 miles away as the crow flies, longer by road. Copy that, Marshall said into the radio. I'm en route. He clipped the radio back to his belt and looked at Elena. Stay here. Not a chance. Elena, I'm coming with you. You said it yourself, multiple witnesses. This is it. This is the chance to document it properly with multiple cameras, multiple perspectives. We can't pass this up. Marshall clearly wanted to argue, but time was wasting. Fine, but you stay in the truck until I assess the situation. And if I tell you to leave, you leave. Deal? Deal. They grabbed equipment quickly. Cameras, spare batteries, Marshall's radio. Elena made sure her phone was recording as well, tucking it into her shirt pocket. Then they were in the truck, racing down the park roads toward observation point. The location was a popular spot for sunset viewing, with a parking area and a short walking trail to an overlook. When they arrived, there were 3 vehicles in the lot and a group of 5 people clustered together, all pointing toward the sky. Marshall parked and got out. Elena followed, despite his warning look. The witnesses turned toward them, 2 couples and a teenager. The teenager saw Marshall's uniform and rushed over. Ranger, thank God, you need to see this. They've just been sitting there, not moving, for like half an hour. Marshall looked where the kid was pointing. At first, Elena didn't see anything. The sky was bright, midday sun making it hard to see details. But then she spotted them. 3 white lights arranged in a triangle formation, just like the ones she'd seen last night. Except these were visible in full daylight. Has anyone tried using binoculars? Marshall asked. One of the men handed over a pair. Marshall looked through them, was quiet for a moment, then passed them to Elena. Tell me what you see. Elena raised the binoculars. Through the magnification, the lights were clearer, but no less mysterious. They were spherical, perfect white, seemingly self-illuminated. No structure around them, no strings, no rotors, and they cast no light on the clouds behind them. They're the same, she said. The exact same as last night. They just appeared, one of the women said. We were hiking, came up to take some photos of the view, and suddenly there they were, just hanging there. Elena pulled out her camera and started shooting, bracketing exposures, trying different settings. Through the viewfinder she could see the lights clearly. Would they show up this time? Marshall was talking to the witnesses, getting their statements, when his radio crackled again. Dispatch to Ranger Tate. Go ahead. We're getting reports from multiple locations. The lights are visible from Sunset Ridge, Devil's Garden, and now someone's calling in from the highway saying they can see them from there. Whatever these things are, they're big. Marshall swore under his breath. Copy that. I'm documenting at observation point. Multiple civilian witnesses. Elena was still shooting, trying to capture every angle, when something changed. The lights started moving. Not fast, but deliberately. They shifted from their triangle formation into a straight line, then back to a triangle, then to a pattern that looked almost like a constellation she couldn't name. "They're making shapes," the teenager said, his voice cracking with excitement or fear. "They're moving." One of the women started crying. "We need to leave. This isn't right. This isn't natural." But Elena couldn't stop shooting. Her photographer's instinct had taken over. This was it. This was the documentation she needed. These lights moving in deliberate patterns, visible to multiple witnesses in broad daylight. Then she heard it. Elena. Her name, clear as a bell. Except no one around her had spoken. She lowered the camera and looked at the group. They were all watching the lights, talking among themselves. Marshall was on his radio. "Elena," louder this time. She turned, scanning the area. The voice wasn't coming from the people. It wasn't coming from anywhere physical. "Elena, look." And against every instinct of self-preservation, she did. She looked directly at the lights. The world tilted. Suddenly, she wasn't standing on the observation platform anymore. She was somewhere else. Somewhere vast and empty and wrong. The sky above wasn't blue. It was a color she didn't have a name for. The ground beneath her feet wasn't ground. It was something that looked like glass, but felt like water. And in front of her stood the figure from the photograph. Tall. Too tall. 7 feet, maybe 8. The proportions were all wrong. Legs too long, arms too long, the head that strange, elongated oval. The skin was smooth, almost luminous, that same not quite white color from the images. And the eyes, dark, so dark, like looking into a well at midnight. Elena tried to scream, but no sound came out. Tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. She could only stand there, frozen, as the figure regarded her with those terrible dark eyes. Then it moved. Not walking, gliding maybe, or existing in one place and then another without the transition in between. It was in front of her, and then it was close, too close, leaning down to bring its face level with hers. Up close, she could see details that her mind struggled to process. The skin wasn't smooth. It was covered in fine patterns, almost like circuit boards, almost organic. The eyes weren't empty. There were structures inside, geometries that shifted and moved. And when it opened its mouth, there were no teeth, just a darkness that seemed to go on forever. It spoke, not with sound, but directly into her mind, and the voice was her voice and her mother's voice and every voice she'd ever known, layered and harmonized until it became something new. "Why do you document what you cannot understand?" Elena found she could speak here, in this place that wasn't a place. "Because I want to understand. Understanding requires transformation. Are you willing to be transformed?" "I don't know what that means." The figure tilted its head, a gesture almost human in its curiosity. "Your kind sees only surfaces. You capture light on sensors and call it truth. But light is the smallest truth. There are larger truths, harder truths. Show me." Elena didn't know why she said it. The words came out before she could stop them. But once spoken, she felt something shift. The figure reached out, those impossibly long fingers, and touched her forehead. Everything exploded into light and sound and sensation. She saw the Earth from orbit, saw time flowing backward and forward simultaneously, saw history and future tangled together. She saw other watchers, other visitors, scattered across the planet, observing, waiting. She felt the weight of ages, of civilizations rising and falling, of humanity as just one small note in a vast cosmic symphony. She saw the lights, understood them now. Not spacecraft, not objects at all. Probes, yes, but also portals, also messages, also warnings. They appeared where reality was thin, where the boundaries between states of being became permeable. They appeared to those who were ready to see them, or those who had been chosen to see them, though she couldn't understand the criteria for selection. And she saw herself. Multiple versions, multiple timelines, branching and diverging. In one, she left and never came back. In another, she stayed and studied and eventually disappeared like Sarah Mitchell. In another, she became something else entirely, something that could exist in both worlds, a bridge between the watchers and the watched. Then, just as suddenly, she was back. She was on the observation platform. Marshall was shaking her shoulder, his face pale with worry. "Elena! Elena, can you hear me?" She blinked, trying to orient herself. The other witnesses were gone. How long had she been, wherever she'd been? What happened? Her own voice sounded strange to her. "You froze up. Just stopped moving, stopped responding. Your eyes were..." Marshall swallowed. "Your eyes were reflecting light in a way eyes don't reflect light. The others got scared, left. That was 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes? It had felt like hours or seconds. Time was wrong. "Can you stand? Can you walk?" Elena tried. Her legs were shaky but functional. "The lights, gone. They disappeared the moment you collapsed. All of them, from every location, just gone." She looked down at her camera, still hanging from her neck. With trembling hands, she turned it on and reviewed the images. The lights were there, clear, visible, undeniable. But when she got to the last few shots, the ones she'd taken while looking directly at them, the images showed something else. They showed her, standing in that impossible place, with that impossible figure reaching toward her, and her eyes in the photo were reflecting light in patterns that looked almost like code, almost like language. "Marshall," she said quietly, "I think they chose me for something." He helped her to the truck, both of them silent. Elena's mind was still reeling, trying to process what she'd experienced. Had it been real? A hallucination? Something in between? As they drove back toward the ranger station, she noticed something odd. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m., but her watch said 11:23 a.m., and her phone's clock was stuck, frozen at 9:17 a.m., the exact time she'd first heard her name called the night before. Time wasn't just wrong. Time was breaking down. Marshall took Elena back to the station, but she couldn't sit still. Her mind was racing, full of images and ideas and half-understood revelations. She paced the small office while Marshall tried to file his report, tried to explain to his supervisor what had happened without sounding insane. "Multiple, reliable witnesses," he said into the phone. "Daytime sighting, clear conditions. I have photographic evidence from multiple sources. Yes, sir. Yes, I understand. No, I'm not. Yes, sir." He hung up and looked at Elena. "They want me to file it as atmospheric phenomenon, pending investigation. That's code for we're not going to investigate." "Of course they're not," Elena said. She was looking at her laptop, going through the photos frame by frame. "Marshall, look at this." She pulled up a sequence of images showing the lights changing formation. When played quickly, one after another, the pattern of movement created something. A message, maybe, or a diagram. "That's a star chart," Marshall said, leaning closer. "See? That's Orion, and that's... I don't know what that is." "It's where they're from," Elena said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Or where they want us to look, or..." She trailed off, frustrated by her inability to articulate what she knew, somehow, to be true. Marshall pulled up a chair. Okay, let's say everything you experienced was real. That thing you saw, that place you went to, real. What did it tell you? Elena closed her eyes, trying to remember through the fragments of memory that felt more like dreams. It asked why I document what I can't understand. It said understanding requires transformation, and it showed me. She struggled to find words. Time doesn't work the way we think it does. We're not alone. We've never been alone, and the lights, they're not just watching us, they're preparing us for something. Preparing us for what? I don't know. It was too big. Too much information at once. It's like trying to download an ocean into a cup. She opened her eyes and looked at him. But I think Sarah Mitchell understood. I think that's why she kept going back. She was trying to learn what they wanted to teach her. And then she vanished. Maybe she didn't vanish. Maybe she chose to go with them, or become them, or whatever happens when you accept the transformation they're offering. Marshall stood and walked to the window, looking out at the desert. The sun was starting to set, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. You sound like you're considering it. I'm considering documenting it, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because Jim Carver started out documenting. Then he started investigating. Then he started changing. His wife said in the last few months he'd wake up speaking languages he'd never learned, drawing symbols he'd never seen. He told her he was dreaming someone else's memories. Elena felt a chill. What happened 3 days before he died? He saw them up close, like you did. He went out alone to the Three Sisters formation and came back 12 hours later with no memory of where he'd been. But he had marks. Marshall turned to face her. Burn marks on his arms in patterns that looked almost like writing. Medical examiner said they were self-inflicted, maybe during a psychotic episode. But Jim insisted they were proof of contact. Do you have pictures? Marshall hesitated, then went back to the filing cabinet. He pulled out a medical photo, hesitated again, then handed it to Elena. The marks on Jim Carver's forearms were precise, too precise to be accidental. They formed patterns that looked geometric and organic at the same time, and Elena recognized them. She'd seen those same patterns on the being's skin when it was close to her. They marked him, she breathed. They left their language on his skin, or he burned himself while hallucinating. You don't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore, Marshall admitted. He took the photo back. What I do know is that this phenomenon, whatever it is, has been happening for decades, maybe centuries. And in all that time, no one's ever come back with definitive proof. No one's ever successfully communicated. No one's ever made contact that led anywhere except confusion and trauma. Maybe we're asking the wrong questions. What do you mean? Elena pulled up the star chart image again. We keep trying to understand them on our terms, using our science, our logic, our frameworks. But what if they're so different from us that our frameworks don't apply? What if trying to study them with cameras and instruments is like trying to photograph a thought? Then how do you suggest we proceed? I don't know, Elena said honestly. But I think maybe the encounter isn't meant to be documented externally. Maybe it's meant to be experienced and remembered. Maybe that's why the photos don't always work. Maybe that's why people lose time. Because they're being taught something that can't be captured with technology. Marshall sat down heavily. So what? We just accept that we'll never really know? That every encounter will be subjective, unverifiable, and possibly traumatic. Maybe. Or maybe we find a different way to verify. Through shared experience, through patterns, through... Her phone buzzed. A text message which shouldn't have been possible because her phone's clock was still frozen and it shouldn't be connected to the network. But there it was. The message had no sender name, just a number she didn't recognize, and the text read, "Come back tonight, alone, the three sisters. We will show you what you're ready to see." Elena showed Marshall. His face went pale. "You're not going." "I have to." "Elena, this is exactly what happened to Sarah Mitchell. She got a message. We found it later in her tent, written in her notebook. Come alone, you will understand." She went alone. She never came back. But what if she did come back, just not in a way we recognize? What if she's still out there, transformed, existing in a way we can't perceive? Elena grabbed Marshall's arm. "Don't you see? Every encounter, every missing person, every strange experience, they're all data points. They're all pieces of the puzzle. And if I go tonight, maybe I can finally complete the picture. Or maybe you'll complete it by becoming one of the missing pieces. That's a risk I have to take. Why? Why does it have to be you?" Elena thought about that. Why did it have to be her? She was just a photographer, just someone who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time, depending on how you looked at it. "Because they chose me," she said finally. "For whatever reason, however they make these decisions, they chose me. And if I don't go, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I missed, what I could have learned, what truth I walked away from." Marshall was quiet for a long moment, then, "If you're going to do this, and I can see I'm not going to talk you out of it, then at least let me try to keep you safe. We'll set up cameras at a distance. I'll monitor from the ranger station. You wear a radio, and if anything goes wrong, you signal me. They won't communicate if they know we're trying to document it. Then we document it anyway, and deal with the consequences. Elena, I'm not letting you walk out there with zero backup. That's non-negotiable." She wanted to argue, but the fear in his eyes stopped her. He'd lost his predecessor to this mystery. He'd seen too many people changed, or traumatized, or disappeared. And despite everything, he was still trying to protect her. "Okay," she agreed. "But Marshall, if something happens, if I don't come back, or I come back, different. You have to promise me you'll keep investigating. You'll keep the echo files. You'll document everything for whoever comes next. Don't talk like that. Promise me. I promise." They spent the rest of the evening preparing. Marshall set up infrared cameras with night vision capability around the Three Sisters formation, positioning them to capture multiple angles while remaining concealed. Elena charged every battery she had, prepared her camera with settings optimized for night shooting, and tried not to think too hard about what she was about to do. At 11 p.m., they drove out to the site. Marshall parked the truck a half-mile away from the Three Sisters, far enough to avoid detection but close enough to respond quickly if needed. Elena checked her radio one more time. "Channel 7, Marshall reminded her. "And Elena, every 15 minutes you check in. Just key the mic, say something, anything. If I don't hear from you for 30 minutes, I'm coming in." "Understood. And if you see anything that feels wrong, you run. Don't try to communicate, don't try to understand. Just run back to this truck and we leave. Clear?" "Clear." She stepped out of the truck. The desert night was cold, the sky absolutely packed with stars. No moon tonight. It had set hours ago. Perfect conditions for seeing lights that didn't belong. Elena walked slowly toward the Three Sisters, her flashlight off, letting her eyes adjust to the starlight. The rock formations loomed ahead, 3 tall pillars of stone that seemed to lean toward each other, like conspirators sharing secrets. She reached the base of the formations and stopped, waiting. The silence was complete. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just her breathing and her heartbeat. "I'm here," she said aloud, feeling foolish. "You asked me to come alone. I'm alone." Nothing happened. Minutes ticked by. Elena kept glancing at her watch, but the hands seemed to be moving wrong. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes ticking backward. 15 minutes. She keyed her radio. "Still here, nothing yet." Marshall's voice crackled back. "Copy, stay alert." She waited. The cold was seeping into her bones. She started to wonder if this was all a mistake, if the message had been a hallucination, if the lights appeared, not gradually, not sliding into view. They were simply there, surrounding the Three Sisters formation in a perfect circle. 12 lights now, not 3. Each one hovering at about head height, each one that same pure white, self-illuminated, casting no glow on anything around it. Elena's breath caught. She reached for her camera, but before she could raise it, she heard the voice. "No." Just that one word, but it stopped her cold. The voice was kind, gentle even, but absolute. "You come to witness, not to capture. You come to understand, not to prove. Put aside your instruments." Elena hesitated, every instinct of her profession screaming at her to document this. But slowly she lowered the camera and set it on the ground. Then the radio, then her phone. All of it, set aside, leaving her standing there with nothing but herself. "Better," the voice said. "Now. Are you ready? Ready for what? To see what you're capable of seeing, to know what you're capable of knowing, to become what you're capable of becoming." The lights began to move, orbiting the Three Sisters faster and faster until they blurred into a solid ring of light. The humming started, that deep, bone-shaking vibration she'd felt before, and the air inside the ring of lights began to shimmer, like heat waves, but this was cold, so cold. Elena stepped forward. She didn't decide to. Her body simply moved, drawn toward the shimmer like iron to a magnet. "Elena, report." Marshall's voice from the radio she'd set down, tiny and distant and utterly irrelevant. She stepped into the shimmer and fell through reality. This time, she didn't lose consciousness. She was fully, completely aware as the world dissolved around her and reformed into something else. She was in that impossible place again. But now she could see it clearly. It wasn't a place at all. It was a space between places. A fold in reality where physical laws were negotiable. The figure was there, and others like it. Tall, luminous, regarding her with those dark eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom. But this time, Elena wasn't afraid. This time, she understood, or began to understand what they were. Not aliens in the way humanity imagined them. Something older than that. Something that existed in the spaces where consciousness intersected with the physical universe. They were observers, witnesses to the unfolding of reality across countless worlds and timelines, and they were lonely. That understanding hit her like a physical blow. These vast, incomprehensible beings, they were lonely. They existed outside of time, outside of space, watching civilizations rise and fall like mayflies, unable to truly connect with any of them because the gap was too wide, the difference too fundamental. Until certain individuals came along, individuals whose consciousness was malleable enough, whose perception was flexible enough to bridge that gap. People like Sarah Mitchell, like Jim Carver, like Elena herself. The figure that had touched her before approached again. This time, Elena didn't flinch. It spoke, not in words but in pure meaning that downloaded directly into her mind. You asked why we chose you. We chose you because you sought to capture light, to preserve moments, to make the invisible visible. You already understood in your own way that reality is layered, that what you see with eyes is only a fraction of what exists. You were ready to see more. What happened to Sarah Mitchell? Elena asked. To Jim Carver, to all the others. They chose transformation. They chose to become bridges, to exist in both states, both worlds simultaneously. They walk among your kind, but they see as we see. They are ambassadors, perhaps, though the translation is imperfect. Are they still human? Define human, define consciousness, define existence itself. These are questions your species struggles with because you believe in boundaries that do not truly exist. Sarah Mitchell is still Sarah Mitchell, but she's also more. Elena thought about that. Thought about her life back in Denver, her apartment, her career, her friends who thought she was just on a photography trip. Could she walk away from all that? Could she return to it after experiencing this? You always have choice, the figure said, responding to her unspoken thoughts. We do not take, we only offer. If you wish to return to your previous existence, we will place you back exactly where and when you started, with only memories and questions. You will struggle to explain. You will be changed, but you will still be you. And if I choose transformation, you will see everything, understand everything. But you will no longer fit in the world you knew. You will be a translator between realities, speaking languages your kind does not yet have words for. You will be witness to truths that will isolate you. You will be forever between. Elena stood in that impossible space, surrounded by beings of light and consciousness, and felt the weight of the decision. Part of her wanted to run, to reject this, to cling to the familiar comfort of her human limitations. But another part, the part that had always driven her to capture beauty, to seek truth, to look deeper, that part was drawn to what they offered. Can I have time to decide? Time is not fixed here. You can have all the time you need, or no time at all. The choice remains the same. Elena closed her eyes. Did she even have eyes here? And thought. She thought about every photo she'd ever taken, trying to capture something ineffable. She thought about the frustration of knowing there was always more than what the camera could see. She thought about Sarah Mitchell, who'd understood something profound enough to abandon her entire life for it. And she thought about Marshall, waiting in that truck, watching his cameras, hoping she'd come back. If I choose transformation, she said, can I still communicate with people like Marshall? Can I help them understand? That would be your purpose, to stand between and translate, to help your species move beyond its current limitations of perception. But understand, they will fear you, they will question you, they will doubt. The path of the bridge is lonely in its own way. Lonelier than existing outside of time, watching everything but touching nothing. The figure tilted its head in that almost human gesture. Perhaps not. Perhaps that is why we offer this choice. Perhaps we are also seeking connection, in the only way we can. Elena opened her eyes. I want to try. I want to see what you see, understand what you understand. But I want to come back. I want to remember who I am. Can that be done? It will be difficult. The human mind was not designed to hold what we will show you. Some break, some lose themselves, but some, like you perhaps, adapt, evolve. I'm willing to try. The figure reached out those impossibly long fingers toward her forehead again. Then let us begin your transformation. The touch was electric. Information flooded into Elena's mind, not in words or images, but in pure understanding. She saw the structure of reality itself, the way space and time were woven together, the way consciousness interacted with physical matter. She saw other worlds, other civilizations, other watchers like these beings. She saw humanity from the outside, a young species just beginning to grasp the true nature of existence. And she saw the future, multiple futures, branching and diverging based on choices not yet made. In some, humanity remained isolated, trapped in their limited perception, eventually destroying themselves or fading into irrelevance. In others, they evolved, learned to see beyond the visible, joined the community of conscious beings that existed in the spaces between worlds. The path between those futures was narrow. It required bridges. It required translators. It required people willing to be transformed. The download continued. Days, weeks. Time had no meaning here. Elena felt her consciousness expanding, felt her perception shifting, felt herself becoming something that could exist in both worlds simultaneously. It was painful, it was ecstatic, it was terrifying and beautiful and overwhelming. And then, suddenly, she was back. She was standing at the base of the Three Sisters formation. The lights were gone. The shimmer was gone. Everything was silent and normal and cold. Elena looked down at her hands. They looked the same. She touched her face. Normal. She took a breath. Her body still worked the same way, but when she looked up at the stars, she could see them differently. She could see the space between them. She could sense the patterns, the connections, the vast web of consciousness that stretched across the cosmos. And she could feel the presence of the watchers, no longer scary or alien, just there, always there. Her radio crackled. "Elena, Elena, please respond. It's been 3 hours. I'm coming in." 3 hours. She'd experienced days, weeks of transformation, but only 3 hours had passed here. She picked up the radio. "Marshall, I'm here. I'm okay, I'm coming back." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank God. What happened? The cameras, they showed you walking into the formation and then nothing. Static for hours." "I'll explain," Elena said. "Or I'll try to. But Marshall, I need you to understand something. I'm different now. I saw things. I understand things. And I'm going to have a hard time explaining them in ways that make sense. As long as you're alive and intact, I don't care. Get back to the truck, now." Elena gathered her equipment. Her camera, her phone, her radio. Everything looked normal. But when she looked at the photos on her camera, she could see things she couldn't see before. Patterns in the static. Messages in the noise. The watchers had left traces everywhere, for anyone with eyes trained to see them. She walked back to the truck. Marshall was standing outside, waiting, and when he saw her, his expression went through several emotions: relief, worry, confusion. "You look the same," he said, as if trying to convince himself. "I am the same. Mostly." Elena managed to smile. "But I can see more now, understand more. They showed me, Marshall. They showed me what they are, why they're here, what they want." "What do they want?" "Contact, real contact. They've been trying for so long, but the gap is too wide. Most people can't perceive them correctly, but some can. And they're hoping that by transforming those some, by creating bridges, maybe eventually your species can evolve to see them clearly." Marshall stared at her. "Your species? Elena, what did they do to you?" "They gave me a choice. I chose this. I chose to see." She looked back at the Three Sisters formations, silhouetted against the stars. Sarah Mitchell made the same choice. Jim Carver was making it when he died. And now I'm making it too. I'm a bridge now, a translator. What does that mean? It means I'm going to help you understand them, document them properly, not with cameras and instruments, but with experience and translation. I'm going to teach other people how to see what I see. Elena turned back to him. And I'm going to need your help. The echo files, all that documentation, that's the beginning. But we need more. We need to reach out to other witnesses, other bridges, other people who've had these experiences. We need to build a network. Marshall shook his head slowly. This is insane. I know, but it's real. More real than anything else. Elena placed her hand on his arm. I know you're scared. I know this is overwhelming. But think about it. For the first time in human history, we have a real chance at understanding what's out there. At joining something bigger than ourselves. Don't you want to be part of that? Marshall looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the three sisters. Then at his truck with all its normal, mundane equipment. Then back at Elena. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, I do. But I also want to keep you safe. Keep other people safe. These transformations. Jim Carver died. Sarah Mitchell vanished. How do I know you're not going to— You don't, Elena admitted. I don't either. This is uncharted territory. But that's why we need to be careful. Document everything. Learn from past mistakes. Build protocols. She smiled. Think of it as an experiment. Humanity's first real attempt at interspecies communication. Interspecies, right. Marshall rubbed his face. Okay. Let's say I'm on board with this. Where do we even start? We start with the others. Other witnesses who've had experiences like mine. We find them, interview them, learn what they know, then we start training people, carefully, slowly, to perceive what the Watchers want us to perceive. We build that bridge, one plank at a time. They stood there in the desert night, two humans on the edge of something vast and unknowable, trying to chart a course through territory no one had successfully navigated before. One condition, Marshall said. We do this right, we do this safely, and if at any point I think you're losing yourself, losing your humanity, we stop. Deal? Deal. They got in the truck and drove back to the ranger station as the first hints of dawn began to light the eastern sky. Elena watched the landscape roll by, seeing it now with both her human eyes and her transformed perception. The red rocks were more than just rocks. They were nodes in a vast network of places where reality was thin, where the Watchers could more easily reach through. The whole desert was alive with unseen patterns, invisible currents of consciousness and energy. She understood now why people had been seeing things here for so long. This place was special. And she was special too, now. Changed. Transformed. Whether that transformation was a gift or a curse, only time would tell. Back at the station, as Marshall made coffee and tried to write a report that wouldn't get him fired or committed, Elena pulled up her photos one more time. She could see them now. Really see them. The patterns in the noise, the messages in the static. The Watchers had left their mark on every image, a signature that only transformed eyes could read. And the signature said, "This is only the beginning." Elena smiled. Yes, it was. The beginning of something new. Something that might save humanity or damn them, elevate them or break them. But either way, she would be there to witness it. To document it, to bridge the gap between what was and what could be. After all, that's what photographers do. They capture light. They make the invisible visible. She'd just learned to see a different kind of light. You know that feeling when something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's what Wes Carter experienced on April 3rd. standing in the middle of Red Canyon with his geological equipment spread around him like a surgeon's tools. Everything looked normal. The Utah sun was where it should be, high and bright at 2 p.m. The wind was doing what wind does in canyon country, whistling through gaps in the sandstone, carrying the smell of sage and dust. But something was off. Wes had been a field geologist for the United States Geological Survey for 7 years. He'd worked in deserts, mountains, coastal regions, and everything in between. He knew how to read rock formations, how to identify minerals by sight and touch, how to take precise measurements that would later be analyzed by teams back at the lab. But nothing in his training had prepared him for what he was about to witness. The project was routine. Document the erosion patterns in Red Canyon's southern sector, take core samples from specific formations, and map the geological strata for a long-term climate study. Wes had been working alone for 3 days, camping in a small tent near the canyon rim, hiking down each morning to take his measurements. He liked the solitude, liked the way the red rocks seemed to glow in the afternoon light, liked the absolute silence that settled over everything when the wind died down. He'd just finished hammering a reference stake into the ground when he noticed it. His shadow was pointing the wrong direction. Not dramatically wrong, just slightly off. Maybe 10 degrees. Wes looked up at the sun, confirmed its position, then looked back at his shadow. The angle didn't match. He moved his arm, watched the shadow move with him. But the shadow's direction was subtly incorrect, as if the sun had shifted position without actually moving. Wes pulled out his compass, checked the time on his watch, calculated where the sun should be based on the date and his coordinates. His math was correct. The sun was exactly where it should be, but his shadow insisted otherwise. He chalked it up to the canyon's weird topology. Light did strange things when it bounced off all that red sandstone. Colors shifted. Reflections created illusions. The whole landscape played tricks on your eyes if you weren't careful. He'd seen it before. Mirages in the distance, pools of water that weren't there. Rock formations that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Wes went back to his measurements, driving stakes into strategic positions to mark his grid. He worked methodically, the way he'd been trained, recording everything in his field notebook with precise handwriting. Stake A7, coordinates noted, depth recorded. Move to the next position. Set up the equipment, take the reading, write it down. That's when he noticed the other shadows. Not just his shadow, all the shadows. Every rock formation, every piece of equipment, every stake he'd driven into the ground. All of their shadows were pointing in the same direction, and it wasn't the direction the sun said they should be pointing. Wes stood up slowly, his pulse starting to quicken. He turned in a full circle, examining the landscape. The shadows of the canyon walls, the shadows of the scattered juniper bushes, the shadow of his backpack sitting 20 feet away. All of them, every single one, was oriented wrong. Not randomly wrong, but wrong in the exact same way, as if there was a second light source somewhere that was overriding the sun. But there was no second light source. The sky was clear, empty except for a few high cirrus clouds. No planes, no helicopters, no drones. Just that brilliant blue sky and the yellow sun and shadows that refused to obey the laws of physics. Wes pulled out his camera and started taking pictures. Years of field work had taught him that when you see something unusual, you document it. Later, in the lab, you can analyze it, figure out the explanation. Probably feel foolish for not seeing the obvious answer in the moment. But in the moment, you document. He photographed his own shadow, then the shadow of a tall sandstone pillar, then a wide shot showing multiple shadows all oriented the same impossible direction. Through the camera's viewfinder, the effect was even more pronounced. The shadows looked like they were painted on the ground, too dark, too sharp-edged, too uniform. Then they started moving. Not quickly, not in any dramatic way that would make you jump, but slowly. Gradually, the shadows began to rotate. All of them, together. Like the hands of a clock turning counterclockwise, every shadow in the canyon shifted position. Wes stood frozen, camera in hand, watching his own shadow slide across the red dirt. The sun hadn't moved. He checked, looked straight up at it, confirmed its position. But the shadows were moving anyway, sliding across the ground like they were alive, like they were being cast by a light source that was orbiting around him. His scientific mind tried to rationalize it. Atmospheric refraction, some kind of temperature inversion, a reflection off the canyon walls creating a secondary light source he couldn't see. But none of those explanations fit what he was observing. The shadows were too solid, too defined, and they were all moving in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by something. The rotation took maybe 2 minutes. Wes stood there the entire time, barely breathing, watching every shadow in his field of view turn 30 degrees counterclockwise. Then they stopped. Just stopped, settling into their new position as if that's where they'd been all along. Wes looked down at his field notebook, still open in his hand. The paper cast a shadow across his palm. That shadow was oriented the same impossible direction as all the others. He was about to radio base camp when he heard the sound. It started low, almost below the range of hearing. More of a vibration than a sound, actually. He felt it in his chest, in his teeth, in the soles of his feet through his hiking boots. A thrumming, a pulse, like a massive engine idling somewhere far away. The wind stopped, just cut off completely, mid-gust. The sage bushes that had been swaying a moment ago stood perfectly still. The dust that had been drifting across the canyon floor settled and didn't rise again. And in that sudden, absolute silence, the thrumming grew louder. Wes turned slowly, trying to locate the source. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from above, maybe, or below. Or from the canyon walls themselves, vibrating with that deep, subsonic pulse. His equipment started malfunctioning. The digital readout on his GPS unit flickered, numbers scrambling. His compass spun lazily in its housing, needle pointing first north, then east, then south, then making another lazy rotation. His watch, a reliable mechanical Timex he'd owned for a decade, started running backward. That's when Wes decided he needed to leave. He moved quickly but carefully, gathering his essential equipment. Camera, notebook, GPS unit, even though it wasn't working. Leave the stakes, leave the reference markers, leave everything that wasn't critical. The thrumming was getting louder, and now he could see something else wrong with the canyon. The colors were changing. The red rocks, that distinctive iron oxide red that gave the canyon its name, were shifting. Becoming more orange, then more brown, then back to red, but a different shade. Like someone was adjusting the saturation on a photograph, turning a dial up and down, making the whole landscape pulse between different versions of itself. Wes slung his pack over his shoulder and started walking fast toward the trail that led out of the canyon. He'd descended about 300 feet from the rim, down a series of switchbacks that were carved into the canyon wall. Going back up would take 20 minutes at a normal pace. He planned to do it in 10. He'd made it maybe 50 yards when he noticed the footprints. His footprints from his hike down that morning. He'd passed this spot on his way to the measurement site. But the footprints he was looking at now weren't from this morning. They couldn't be, because they were heading in the wrong direction, toward the measurement site, not away from it. Wes stopped, staring at the prints. They were definitely his boots. He recognized the tread pattern, the slight scuff on the right heel where he'd scraped against a rock last week. But these prints were fresh, He could see where the dust had been displaced, the way the grains of sand had fallen into the depression. These prints had been made within the last few minutes, but he hadn't walked this direction in the last few minutes. He'd just now started walking this way, and these were prints ahead of him, going the same direction. He felt his scalp prickle, felt sweat break out on his forehead despite the dry desert air, felt every instinct he had screaming at him that something was fundamentally wrong with the space he was occupying. Wes started jogging. Not quite running, the terrain was too uneven for that, too many rocks and crevices where you could break an ankle, but moving as fast as he dared. He kept his eyes on the trail ahead, trying not to look at the shadows that were still oriented wrong, trying not to notice how the colors of the canyon walls kept shifting subtly. The thrumming followed him. Or maybe he was carrying it with him. He couldn't tell anymore. It felt like it was inside his skull now, vibrating his thoughts, making it hard to think clearly. He was halfway up the switchback trail when he saw the figure. Just for a second. Just a glimpse out of the corner of his eye. Someone, something, standing on a ledge about 40 feet above him. Tall. Too tall. The proportions were wrong in a way he couldn't quite define. Long limbs, elongated torso, and the head. Wes jerked his gaze back to the trail, heart pounding. Don't look at it. Don't acknowledge it. Just keep moving. But the image was burned into his mind. That silhouette against the red rock. Human-shaped, but not human. Watching him, he practically ran the last 100 feet to the canyon rim, stumbling over rocks, his pack banging against his back. When he finally pulled himself up onto the flat ground at the top, he turned around immediately, looking back down into the canyon. Nothing, just red rocks and shadows and empty air. No figure on the ledge. No sign of anything unusual at all. But the thrumming was still there. Quieter now, fading, but still present. And when Wes looked down at his shadow, cast by the afternoon sun across the tan dirt of the canyon rim, it was pointing exactly where it should be pointing. Perfect alignment. Physics working normally again. He pulled out his phone. He had signal up here, unlike down in the canyon, and called his supervisor. Jameson, it's Wes. Something's wrong with the equipment. Or with me. Or with the canyon, I don't know. But I need someone else to come out here and verify what I'm seeing. Slow down, Wes. What happened? The shadows. They were moving wrong. And there was a sound. And my equipment malfunctioned. All of it. Simultaneously. There was a pause. Wes could hear typing in the background. Jameson was probably already logging this as a potential equipment failure. Are you feeling okay? Dehydrated? Heat exhaustion? I'm fine. I'm completely fine. But something happened down there, something that doesn't make sense. Okay, give me your coordinates. I'll send Janelle out to meet you. She's working the northern sector. Should be able to reach you by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning? It's only 2 p.m. Wes, it's 4:30. You've been out of contact for 2.5 hours. Wes looked at his watch. The mechanical one that had been running backward in the canyon. It showed 4:27 p.m. He'd lost time. Somehow, between noticing the shadows and reaching the canyon rim, 2.5 hours had disappeared. Send Janelle, he said quietly. And Jameson, tell her to bring extra equipment. Cameras, recording devices, everything. If this happens again, I want it documented. Will do. Camp where you are tonight. Don't go back down until Janelle arrives. Wes agreed and hung up. He looked back down into the canyon one more time. The shadows were normal now. Everything was normal. But he could feel it. A presence, a watching, an awareness that hadn't been there before. Something in Red Canyon had noticed him, and he had the terrible feeling it wasn't done with him yet. He set up his tent on the canyon rim, farther back from the edge than he normally would. Built a fire even though it was still light out, wanting the comfort of flames and warmth. And as the sun set and the canyon filled with purple shadows, normal shadows, cast at normal angles, Wes sat with his field notebook open, trying to document what he'd experienced. But when he looked down at the pages, he found something that made his blood run cold. There were drawings he didn't remember making. Circles and vertical lines arranged in patterns that seemed almost mathematical. They filled the margins of his measurements, covered the bottom of pages, even appeared on the inside back cover. Precise, deliberate marks made with his own pen. But Wes had no memory of drawing them. None at all. He flipped through the entire notebook. The symbols appeared on every page he'd used today. Always the same. Circles of varying sizes, vertical lines in groups of 3 or 5 or 7, sometimes with horizontal connectors, sometimes standing alone. His hand was shaking as he closed the notebook. He pulled out his camera, reviewed the photos he'd taken in the canyon. The shadows, the landscape, the documentation of the impossible phenomenon he'd witnessed. But interspersed between those photos were others. Close-ups of rock formations he didn't remember photographing. Images of the sky, perfectly centered, showing nothing but blue. And one photo that made him set the camera down carefully and stand up to pace around his campfire. The photo showed him. Wes himself, taken from behind, standing at his measurement site. Taken from an elevated angle, as if the photographer had been floating about 10 feet above and behind him. But he'd been alone in that canyon. Completely alone. Wes forced himself to sit back down, forced himself to think rationally. Maybe he'd had some kind of episode. A small stroke, a seizure, something medical that caused him to lose time and do things he didn't remember. That would explain the drawings, the photos, the missing hours. But it wouldn't explain the shadows. It wouldn't explain his malfunctioning equipment. It wouldn't explain the thrumming sound or the figure he'd seen on the ledge. He needed Janelle to arrive. Needed another set of eyes, another witness, someone to tell him he wasn't losing his mind. The night was long and cold. Wes dozed fitfully in his tent, waking at every sound. Once he heard that thrumming again, distant and faint. Once he thought he saw lights moving along the canyon rim, but when he looked directly at them, there was nothing there. And once, in the deepest part of the night, he woke with the absolute certainty that someone was standing just outside his tent. He lay there, heart hammering, listening. No sound, no movement. Just that presence, that awareness, that feeling of being observed. "Who are you?" he whispered to the dark. "What do you want?" No answer, but the feeling gradually faded, and eventually Wes fell back into uneasy sleep. He woke at dawn to the sound of a vehicle approaching. Janelle Porter's USGS truck, distinctive with its government plates and agency logo, was bouncing along the dirt road that led to the rim overlook. Wes crawled out of his tent, stiff and exhausted. Janelle parked and got out, taking one look at him and frowning. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too." Wes managed a weak smile. "Thanks for coming." Janelle was a geochemist, 5 years younger than Wes, with a reputation for being thorough and skeptical in equal measure. If anyone could help him figure out what had happened, it was her. She started unloading equipment from the truck, extra cameras, a laptop, various monitoring devices. "Jameson said you had some kind of equipment failure, and mentioned something about shadows?" "Yeah." Wes rubbed his face. "It's gonna sound crazy. I work in science. I've heard crazier." So, Wes told her everything. The shadows pointing wrong, the rotation, the thrumming sound, the missing time. He showed her the photos on his camera, showed her the drawings in his notebook, and he told her about the figure he'd seen on the ledge. Janelle listened without interrupting, her expression neutral. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. Let's approach this systematically. First, we verify the equipment. If your GPS and compass were malfunctioning, there might be a magnetic anomaly in the area. That could explain some of this. And the shadows? One thing at a time. She pulled out her own compass, watched the needle settle, pointing north. Steady. No rotation. Mine's working fine. Let me see yours. Wes handed over his compass. Janelle tested it, tapping the glass, rotating the housing. Working normally now, but that doesn't mean it wasn't malfunctioning yesterday. She made notes on a tablet. Let's go down into the canyon, retrace your steps, document everything. They spent the next hour preparing. Janelle set up a base station on the rim with recording equipment, timestamps, even a webcam pointed down into the canyon. If something weird happens, we'll have a record of it from up here, she explained. Then they descended into the canyon together, following the switchback trail. Wes led the way, pointing out landmarks. This is where I saw my own footprints going the wrong direction, and up there, he pointed to the ledge. That's where the figure was standing. We'll check it out. First, let's get to your measurement site. They walked in silence through the canyon. The morning light was different from the afternoon light Wes had experienced yesterday, casting longer shadows. But those shadows were all pointing in the correct direction. Normal. No anomalies. When they reached the measurement site, Wes's reference stakes were still there, exactly where he'd left them. His equipment was scattered around, abandoned in his hasty retreat. Janelle immediately started taking readings with her own instruments, comparing them to baseline data. Magnetic field is normal, she reported. No unusual radiation signatures. Temperature and humidity are within expected parameters. She looked around the site. Everything looks completely ordinary, Wes. I know, it does now, but yesterday, I believe you observed something. I'm just trying to determine what it was. They worked for another hour, Janelle methodically testing everything she could think of. She took photographs from multiple angles, documented the position of every shadow, recorded the ambient sound levels. All normal, all perfectly, frustratingly normal. Then Wes noticed something. Janelle, look at the ground here. There were marks in the dust, not footprints, something else. Circles and vertical lines traced into the red dirt as if someone had drawn them with a stick. The same patterns that appeared in Wes's notebook. Janelle photographed them carefully. You said you don't remember drawing these in your notebook. No, but I must have. I mean, who else would have? That's the question. Janelle knelt down, examining the ground marks closely. These are fresh, made within the last 24 hours, based on how sharp the edges are. But you said you were moving quickly when you left yesterday. You wouldn't have stopped to draw in the dirt. I didn't. I'm certain I didn't. Then who did? They both looked around the empty canyon. Red walls rising on either side. Blue sky above. Silence except for a light wind. No sign of any other human presence. No sign of anything unusual at all. Let's check that ledge, Janelle said. The one where you saw the figure. They found a route up, scrambling over rocks and testing handholds. The ledge was about 40 feet above the canyon floor, offering a clear view of the measurement site below. And when they reached it, they found something that made them both stop short. More symbols. Dozens of them. Carved into the rock face of the ledge. Not scratched or chipped, carved precisely, with clean edges and uniform depth. Circles and vertical lines in the same patterns that appeared in Wes's notebook and drawn in the dust below. But these carvings were old, not yesterday old. The rock around them showed weathering, lichen growth in the recessed areas. These symbols had been here for years, maybe decades. "Wes," Janelle said slowly, "have you ever been to this ledge before?" "Never. This is my first time working this sector." "Then, how did these symbols end up in your notebook?" They stared at the ancient carvings, both of them understanding the implication. Somehow, the patterns that had appeared in Wes's notebook, patterns he didn't remember drawing, matched symbols that had been carved into this rock long before he arrived in Red Canyon. "We need to document this," Janelle said, pulling out her camera, "and we need to research these symbols. See if they match anything in the archaeological record." But as she was photographing the carvings, something happened that made them both freeze. The shadows started moving. Janelle saw it too. That's what Wes needed to know more than anything. He wasn't hallucinating, wasn't experiencing some kind of neurological event, because Janelle was standing right next to him on that ledge, camera in hand, and she was watching the exact same impossible thing he was watching. Every shadow in the canyon, the shadow of the tall sandstone pillar 40 yards away, the shadow of a juniper bush clinging to the canyon wall, the shadow cast by Janelle's raised arm as she pointed, all of them were rotating. Slowly, deliberately, moving counterclockwise in perfect synchronization. "Tell me you're seeing this," Wes said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm seeing it." Janelle's scientific composure had cracked. Her hand was shaking as she raised her camera, trying to photograph the phenomenon. "What's the light source? Where's it coming from?" They both looked up. The sun was exactly where it should be, a bright point in the cloudless morning sky. But the shadows it cast were defying every law of physics, rotating as if there was a second sun orbiting around them. The rotation took longer this time, maybe 3 minutes. Wes watched his own shadow slide across the red rock of the ledge, watched it stretch and compress as it moved. Through it all, the real sun didn't budge, didn't shift position. The shadows were moving independent of their light source. When they finally stopped, settling into their new position, Wes and Janelle stood in silence. Then Janelle lowered her camera and looked at the screen, reviewing what she'd captured. Her expression shifted from confusion to something close to fear. "Wes, the camera didn't record it." "What?" She held up the camera, showing him the screen. The images showed the canyon, the rocks, the two of them standing on the ledge. But the shadows in the photos were in the correct position, normal, unmoved, as if the rotation had never happened. "That's impossible," Wes said. "We both saw it. We watched it happen in real time." "I know. But look," Janelle flipped through image after image. All of them showed normal shadows. It's like the camera is recording a different version of reality than what we're actually experiencing. Then the sound started. That same deep thrumming Wes had heard yesterday. Janelle heard it too. He could tell by the way her eyes widened, the way her body went rigid. "We need to get back to the rim," she said. "Now. While we can." They scrambled down from the ledge, moving faster than was safe, sending small rocks tumbling ahead of them. The thrumming was getting louder, that subsonic pulse that made Wes's teeth ache. And now there was something else, a feeling in the air, like static electricity before a lightning strike. They were halfway back to the switchback trail when Janelle stopped abruptly. "Wes, the equipment." She was right. They'd left their gear at the measurement site. Cameras, recording devices, the laptop. Expensive equipment that the USGS would expect them to recover. But the thought of going back deeper into the canyon, with that thrumming getting louder and the shadows doing impossible things, made Wes's stomach clench. "Leave it," he said. "We'll come back with more people, more resources." "The data," Janelle interrupted. "All the readings I took. If we leave now, we have no proof. No evidence beyond our testimony and photos that don't show what we saw." She was right. Wes knew she was right. But every instinct was screaming at him to get out of this canyon, to reach open ground, to put distance between himself and whatever was happening here. "I'll get it," Janelle said. "You head up. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, we go together." Wes cut her off. "I'm not leaving you alone down here." They turned back toward the measurement site. The thrumming seemed to intensify, as if responding to their decision. The air felt thicker now, harder to breathe. And the quality of the light in the canyon had changed. It looked almost polarized, like they were viewing the landscape through filtered lenses. The measurement site was only 100 yards away, but it felt like miles. Every step seemed to take more effort than it should. Wes felt like he was walking through water, resistance pushing back against his movements. Then he saw them. Footprints, fresh ones, in the dust ahead of them. 2 sets, his boots and Janelle's. But these prints were walking away from the measurement site, not toward it, walking in the exact path they were currently taking. Janelle saw them too. "Those are our prints." "Can't be. We haven't walked this way yet." "I know, but look at them. That's my boot tread. And that's yours. I can see the scuff mark on your right heel." They stood there, staring at footprints that shouldn't exist, and Wes felt reality becoming slippery around him. Time wasn't working right in this canyon. Space wasn't working right. The normal rules that governed existence seemed to be suspended, replaced by something else, something that operated by different laws. "Keep moving," Janelle said. "Don't think about it. Just keep moving." They reached the measurement site. Janelle's laptop was still there, closed and sitting on a flat rock where she'd left it. Her camera equipment was arranged neatly beside it. Too neatly. Janelle frowned as she picked up the camera bag. "I didn't leave it like this. I had it open with the lenses scattered around while I was changing them." "Maybe you—" "I didn't." Her voice was firm. "Someone else was here. Someone closed this bag and arranged everything recently." The thrumming suddenly cut off. Just stopped, mid-pulse, leaving a silence that was somehow worse than the sound had been. In that silence, Wes heard something else. Footsteps. Multiple sets, coming from somewhere deeper in the canyon. "Run," he said. They grabbed what they could. Laptop, camera, a few pieces of equipment, and started moving fast, not back toward the switchback trail this time. That was too far. Too exposed. Instead, they headed for a narrow side canyon Wes had noticed earlier. A crack in the rock wall, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The footsteps behind them were getting closer. Not running. Walking. Multiple sets, maintaining a steady pace, not hurrying. That was somehow more terrifying than if they'd been running. These footsteps were confident, unhurried, like whatever was making them knew that Wes and Janelle couldn't escape. They reached the crack in the wall and squeezed through. The passage was tight, forcing them to turn sideways, their backpacks scraping against stone on both sides. The rock walls pressed in from both sides, rough sandstone catching on their clothes, 20 feet, 30. The passage curved, and suddenly they were in a small chamber, maybe 10 feet across, open to the sky above. And they were not alone. The chamber walls were covered in symbols, the same circles and vertical lines carved deep into the rock. But these weren't weathered like the ones on the ledge. These looked fresh, sharp-edged, like they'd been made yesterday, or today, or 10 seconds ago. "Jesus," Janelle breathed. "There must be hundreds of them." Wes turned slowly, taking in the full extent of it. Every available surface was carved with the patterns. Floor, walls, even a few marks on a boulder that sat in the center of the chamber. The symbols seemed to have a structure, a grammar. like a language or a mathematical formula written in stone. "Take pictures," he said. "Document everything, quick." Janelle started shooting, moving systematically around the chamber. Wes pulled out his notebook, trying to sketch the pattern, trying to find some logic to the arrangement. Were they organized by size, by position? Was there a sequence, a reading order? That's when he noticed the paper. A sheet had fallen from his notebook, landing near the central boulder. But when he picked it up, he realized it wasn't from his notebook. The paper was different. Heavier weight, slightly yellowed, and it was covered in drawings. More circles and lines, but these were annotated. Notes in the margins, measurements, calculations. The handwriting wasn't his. It was older, shakier, and at the bottom of the page, a name, James Carver, dated 96. "Janelle," Wes said, "look at this." She came over, looked at the paper, and her expression changed. "That's..." Jim Carver was one of the early researchers here. USGS geologist. He disappeared in 1996 while working this sector. Disappeared how? Just vanished. They found his equipment, his campsite, everything. But no body. No trace of where he went. It was a big deal at the time. They searched for weeks. Wes looked at the paper again, at the careful drawings and notes. He found this place. He saw the symbols, and he was trying to figure out what they meant. And then he disappeared. Janelle finished quietly. The footsteps had stopped. Wes suddenly realized he couldn't hear them anymore. The silence in the chamber was absolute, heavy, expectant. He moved to the entrance crack, peered out cautiously. The canyon beyond was empty. No figures, no movement. Just red rock and blue sky and shadows that were... He checked carefully, pointing in the correct direction now. Everything looked normal again. "They're gone," he said. "Whatever was following us, it's gone. Or it's waiting." Janelle was still photographing the chamber walls. "Wes, these symbols, some of them match patterns used in theoretical mathematics. Look at this sequence here. That's a Fibonacci spiral. And over here, this could be a representation of the golden ratio. So what? Ancient aliens teaching math? I don't know what it is, but someone carved these. Someone with knowledge of advanced mathematical concepts. And based on the weathering patterns, or lack thereof, some of these carvings are old and some are new. Like the chamber is being added to, updated." Wes thought about the drawings in his own notebook, the ones he didn't remember making. What if we're the ones adding to it? What do you mean? The missing time. Both of us have experienced it. Me, yesterday, and I'm betting we've lost time again today. What if during those gaps, something is using us, making us draw these symbols, carve these walls? Janelle lowered her camera slowly. That's a disturbing theory. You have a better explanation?" Before she could answer, Wes's phone buzzed. Impossible. There was no signal this deep in the canyon. But the phone was definitely vibrating, definitely showing an incoming call. The screen showed unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity, or stupidity, won out. "Hello?" Static, just crackling static. But underneath it, something else. A rhythm, a pattern. Wes pulled the phone away from his ear, put it on speaker so Janelle could hear. The static pulsed. 3 short bursts, 2 long, 3 short again. Pause. Repeat, 3 short, 2 long, 3 short. "Morse code," Janelle said. "SOS." They listened for another minute. The pattern repeated, perfect and mechanical. SOS, SOS, SOS. A distress signal being transmitted to a phone that shouldn't be able to receive calls in this location. Then a voice came through. Distorted. Wrong. like someone speaking through layers of interference, but recognizable as human, male, frightened, don't know how long, signal, they're watching, can't stop, drawing. The symbols, please. If anyone, Red Canyon, don't come alone. The call cut off. Wes stared at the phone. 1 bar of signal, no call record. Nothing in his recent calls list, like it had never happened. "Did you hear that?" he asked Janelle. "I heard it." She had gone pale. That voice. I've heard recordings of Jim Carver, from interviews he did before he disappeared. That sounded like him. That's impossible. He vanished in '96. That was 30 years ago. I know, but Janelle grabbed the paper they'd found, the one with Carver's name on it. What if he didn't exactly disappear? What if he's still here somehow, caught in whatever is happening in this canyon? Wes felt cold despite the warm air. You're saying he's been here for 30 years? Alive? I'm saying time doesn't work right here. We've both experienced that. And space doesn't work right either. We've seen footprints from the future, shadows that disobey physics. What if Jim Carver walked into something he couldn't walk out of? What if he's trapped in some kind of loop or pocket dimension or, I don't know, something outside the normal reality? The phone buzzed again. A text message this time. Again from unknown number. No words, just an image, a photograph. It showed Janelle and Wes standing in the symbol chamber. Taken from the entrance crack, shooting inward. Taken approximately 30 seconds ago based on their positions. But there had been no one at the entrance. They'd checked. The canyon had been empty. Someone's here with us, Janelle whispered, or watching us, recording us. Wes moved to the entrance crack quickly, looked out again. Still nothing, no figures, no movement, no sign of any person or camera or drone. Just the empty canyon, silent and still under the midday sun. Another text came through. This time it contained words. You are adding to the message. When you are ready, you will understand the message. Continue the work. What work? Janelle demanded, staring at the phone. We're not doing any work, we're just trying to get out of here alive. As if in response, another text arrived. Another photograph. This one showed Wes's notebook, open to a page covered in the circle and line symbols. But it wasn't a page he'd seen before. The symbols were arranged in a specific pattern, forming what looked almost like a map, or a diagram, or instructions for something. Wes pulled out his actual notebook and flipped through it. And there was the page. Exactly as shown in the photo. Filled with symbols he absolutely did not remember drawing, in his handwriting, in his ink. I didn't do that, he said, voice shaking. I swear I didn't draw those. I believe you. Janelle was going through her own equipment bag. But look at this. She pulled out a folder he'd never seen before. Inside were more drawings, more symbols, and mixed in with them were printouts of academic papers, articles about archaeological sites, research into ancient mathematical systems. This isn't mine, Janelle said. I didn't bring this. I don't even recognize half these papers. But here's the weird thing. Some of them are dated from this year, from journals that haven't published yet. These papers are from the future. They looked at each other, the implications settling in like cold water. We need to leave, Wes said, right now. We take what we have, we get back to the rim, and we call for backup. The USGS, university researchers, maybe even the military. But we don't stay here alone. Agreed. Janelle started packing up their equipment. But Wes, I don't think we're going to be allowed to leave. Not easily. Whatever this is, whatever's happening in Red Canyon, I think it wants us here. Needs us here, maybe, to continue adding to these symbols. As if to confirm her words, the thrumming sound started again, louder this time. So loud it made the ground vibrate, made small rocks shake and dust drift down from the chamber walls. And with the sound came that feeling again, the static electricity sensation, the sense of reality becoming thin and permeable. The symbols on the walls began to glow, not bright, just a faint luminescence like phosphorescence, each carved line emitting a soft blue-green light that pulsed in time with the thrumming. The effect was hypnotic, beautiful, and absolutely terrifying. "Out," Janelle said. "Now." They squeezed back through the entrance crack, emerging into the main canyon, and stopped short. The canyon had changed. Not dramatically, the rocks were still red, the sky still blue, but details were wrong. A juniper bush that had been on the left side of the canyon was now on the right. A rock formation that had been shaped like a mushroom was now more columnar, and in the distance, where the switchback trail should be, there was just smooth canyon wall. "Where's the trail?" Wes turned in a circle, trying to orient himself. "It was right there. We walked down it this morning." "I don't think we're in the same canyon anymore," Janelle said quietly. "Or the same version of the canyon, or I don't know how to explain it, but this isn't where we started." The footsteps came again. Multiple sets, approaching from multiple directions. Wes and Janelle stood back to back, scanning the canyon. They could hear the steps clearly, crunch of gravel, scuff of shoe on stone, but they couldn't see anyone. Then figures appeared, not suddenly. They seemed to fade into visibility, like someone adjusting the opacity on a layer in Photoshop. Translucent at first, then more solid. 6 of them. Human-shaped but not quite right. Too tall, proportions slightly off, and their faces. The faces were human. Different humans. A woman in her 30s wearing hiking clothes from the 1990s. A man in his 50s with a USGS uniform. A younger guy, maybe 20, in college gear. And 3 others, various ages, various eras of clothing. They all looked exhausted, hollowed out, and they all held papers covered in symbols. The woman in 90s hiking gear spoke first. "You'll get used to it. The canyon, the symbols, the time shifts. Eventually, you stop trying to leave and start trying to understand." "Who are you?" Janelle demanded. "My name was Sarah Bennett. I came here in '94 to photograph the canyon for a calendar. I've been here ever since." She gestured to the others. "We've all been here. Jim," she indicated the man in the USGS uniform. "He's been here the longest. 28 years. "Jim Carver?" Wes stared at the man. He looked older than the photos Wes had seen, grayer, more worn. But it was recognizably the same person. Jim nodded slowly. "We tried to leave, all of us, dozens of us, over the years. But the canyon doesn't let go once it has you. It needs us. Needs our hands to continue the work, needs our minds to process the patterns. We're translators, in a way. Converting something incomprehensible into something that can be understood." "Converting what?" Janelle asked. "A message," Jim said. "From somewhere else, sometime else. We don't know who sent it or why. But it's coming through the canyon, using us as the medium to make it visible. The symbols, the patterns, they're accumulating, building towards something, a complete transmission." "How do we stop it?" Wes demanded. "You don't," Sarah said sadly. "Once you've drawn the symbols, once they've used your hand even once, you're connected. You'll keep drawing them, keep adding to the pattern, whether you want to or not. Eventually, you'll stop fighting it. You'll accept that this is your purpose now." "No," Janelle said firmly. "No, that's not acceptable. There has to be a way out. We're scientists. We solve problems. This is just another problem to solve. The other figures, the ones who hadn't spoken, began to fade, becoming translucent again, then invisible. Jim Carver looked at Wes and Janelle with something like pity in his eyes. When you're ready to understand, you'll find us in the symbol chamber. We'll teach you what we've learned. Until then, he gestured to the canyon around them. Good luck finding your way back. Then, he faded too. Sarah was the last to go. Just before she vanished completely, she said, "The shadows. Watch the shadows. They're pointing the way. You just have to learn to read them." And then Wes and Janelle were alone in the canyon again. Alone with the glowing symbols on the walls and the footprints in the dust and the weight of knowledge they didn't want. The canyon was changing around them. Wes could see it happening now that he knew what to look for. Small details shifting, reality editing itself. A crack in a rock face that hadn't been there a moment ago, a shadow that flickered and jumped position when he wasn't looking directly at it. The light itself seemed to pulse, growing brighter and dimmer in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. "We need to find the way back," Janelle said. She was turning in place, analyzing their surroundings with systematic precision. The trail has to be here somewhere. Topography doesn't just change. Even if we're experiencing some kind of hallucination or temporal displacement, the actual physical landscape should be consistent. But Wes wasn't sure about that anymore. Everything they'd experienced suggested that the physical landscape was exactly what wasn't consistent. Red Canyon was behaving like something living, something that could reconfigure itself at will. Or maybe they were moving between different versions of the canyon, sliding between layers of reality that normally stayed separate. He pulled out his phone. Still one bar of signal, impossibly. Still showing texts from an unknown number. He scrolled back through them, looking for anything that might help. The photograph of them in the symbol chamber. The message about continuing the work. The page from his notebook showing symbols arranged like a map. A map? Janelle, he said slowly. What if those symbols aren't random? What if they are actually a map? Instructions for navigating whatever space we're in. She came over, looked at the photo on his phone. That would require the symbols to have consistent meaning. A grammar, a logic we could decipher. Jim Carver's been here for 28 years. Sarah Bennett for 30. If anyone's had time to figure out the logic, it's them. They also said we're trapped, that we can't leave. They said the canyon doesn't let go. But maybe they never found the right path. Maybe the symbols can show us what they couldn't see. It was desperate thinking, grasping at any possibility. But Wes pulled out his notebook and started comparing the symbols on the photographed page to the patterns they'd seen carved into the chamber walls. Circles of various sizes, vertical lines in groups, horizontal connectors. There had to be meaning in the arrangement. Janelle joined him, pulling up her own photographs of the chamber on her camera. "If this is a map," she said, thinking out loud, "we need to figure out what represents what. The circles could be locations. The lines could be paths between them. Or the circles could be times," Wes suggested. "And the lines are the connections between different temporal states. We know time is unstable here." They worked in silence for several minutes, trying different interpretations. The thrumming sound had faded to a background hum, always present but no longer overwhelming. The canyon around them remained still, waiting. Then Janelle made a sound of realization. "Wes, look at this pattern here." She pointed to a cluster of circles with multiple lines radiating outward. "That's not mathematical, it's astronomical. That's a star chart. Or, wait, it could be a planetary system." Wes looked closer. She was right. The central circle with smaller circles orbiting around it, connected by curved lines that could represent orbital paths. And there, at the edge of the pattern, a group of 7 vertical lines. 7 lines, he said. What's significant about 7? Could be anything. 7 planets, 7 dimensions, 7 stages of transformation. Janelle was photographing the page, taking detailed shots. But look at how it connects to the rest of the pattern. These lines lead from the planetary system to another cluster, and that cluster has the same kind of circles and lines we saw in the chamber. They were starting to see it now. The symbols weren't just random marks. They formed a network, a web of connections that sprawled across every surface in the canyon. Each carving, each drawing in a notebook, each pattern scratched in the dust, they were all pieces of a larger whole. It's a communication system, Wes breathed. Someone's trying to send a message through space and time, and Red Canyon is the receiving station. We're the translators turning the signal into something visible. But who's sending it? Janelle demanded. And why here? Why this canyon? Before Wes could answer, his phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. This time it was just 2 words. Look up. They both tilted their heads back, looking at the strip of sky visible between the canyon walls. At first, Wes didn't see anything unusual, just blue sky, a few clouds, the bright point of the sun. Then he noticed the stars. Stars, visible in daylight. Dozens of them scattered across the blue sky like someone had punched holes in a curtain. That was impossible. The sun was too bright, the atmosphere too thick. You couldn't see stars during the day without specialized equipment. But there they were. And as Wes watched, they began to move. Not the slow drift of celestial objects across the sky, but deliberate movement. The stars were forming a pattern, rearranging themselves into the same configuration shown in the symbols. The central circle with smaller circles orbiting. The 7 vertical lines at the edge. They're showing us, Janelle whispered. They're demonstrating that the symbols represent actual locations, actual stellar positions. The phone buzzed again. Another message. You are close to understanding. The message is almost complete. When it is complete, you will choose. Choose what? Wes typed back. The reply came immediately. To stay or to return. To forget or to remember. To close the door or to keep it open. The stars in the daytime sky were pulsing now, growing brighter and dimmer in that familiar rhythm. The thrumming sound increased in volume, and Wes felt that static electricity sensation again. Something was building. Something was about to happen. We need to complete the pattern, he said suddenly. That's what this is about. The message isn't finished. It needs more symbols, more connections, and we're the ones who can provide them. Wes, if we do that, we might end up like Jim and Sarah, trapped here. We might already be trapped, but if we complete the pattern, maybe we'll understand what we're trapped in. Maybe we'll gain some control over it. Janelle looked at him, weighing the risk. Then she nodded. Okay, but we document everything. Every symbol we draw, every connection we make. If we're going to be part of this, we do it as scientists. With records, with methodology, with the hope that someone who comes after us can learn from what we discover. They went back to the symbol chamber, squeezing through the entrance crack. The glowing symbols were still pulsing on the walls, that eerie blue-green luminescence. But now Wes understood what he was looking at. These weren't random carvings. They were a database, a library, generations of information encoded in stone. Jim Carver was waiting for them in the chamber. He looked more solid now, more real, as if their decision to engage with the pattern had somehow made him more present. You're beginning to understand, he said. It wasn't a question. We need to finish the message, Wes said. Can you show us how? Jim gestured to the chamber walls. Each symbol builds on the ones before it. The pattern has been growing for I don't know how long. Centuries, maybe, millennia. Everyone who comes to the canyon and experiences the phenomena, they add their piece, their perspective, their understanding. But what's the end goal? Janelle asked. What happens when the pattern is complete? That's what we're trying to find out. Jim pulled out a worn notebook, similar to Wes's but much older. I've been documenting my observations for 28 years. The pattern has been accelerating. More people drawn to the canyon, more symbols added, more connections made. I think we're approaching some kind of threshold, a completion point. Sarah Bennett appeared then, along with the other trapped researchers. They all carried notebooks, all had that same exhausted but determined look. They'd been working on this problem for years, trying to solve it from the inside. We need fresh eyes, Sarah said. Fresh perspectives. That's why the canyon keeps drawing new people in. We've gone as far as we can with our understanding. But you, she looked at Janelle, you have training in geochemistry. Different specialization, different way of thinking. And you, to Wes, you're newer to this, less conditioned to see the pattern in a certain way. They spent the next several hours, or what felt like hours. Time was slippery in the chamber, going through the accumulated documentation. Jim's 28 years of notes, Sarah's photographs and drawings, records from others who'd been trapped in the canyon, each adding their piece to the puzzle. A pattern emerged. The symbols represented a kind of multi-dimensional map, not just space and time, but layers of reality itself. The canyon was a weak point, a place where those layers could overlap and interact. And the message being transmitted through the symbols was instructions. Instructions for how to navigate between layers, how to access different states of existence. It's a door, Wes realized. The complete pattern will create a door between realities. More than that, Janelle added, studying a particularly complex cluster of symbols. It's a two-way door. Something from another layer can come through to us, and we can go through to them. The question is, Jim said quietly, should we open it? That's when Wes understood the choice they were being offered. The message wasn't just information, it was an invitation. Complete the pattern, open the door, and make contact with whatever intelligence was on the other side. Whatever beings had been sending this message through space and time, using Red Canyon as their transmission point. If we don't complete it, Sarah said, we stay trapped. The canyon keeps us here, keeps pulling in new people, until someone finally finishes the work. And if we do complete it, Wes asked, we find out what's on the other side, for better or worse. Janelle pulled Wes aside, away from the other researchers. This is insane, she said quietly. We're talking about opening some kind of interdimensional portal based on symbols we barely understand. This could be dangerous. This could be catastrophic. It could also be incredible, Wes countered. First contact with an alien intelligence, understanding of physics beyond our current knowledge. This is what every scientist dreams of, or nightmares about. We don't know what we're letting in, but we know what happens if we don't act. We stay trapped, like Jim and Sarah. And eventually, the pattern gets completed anyway by whoever the canyon draws in next. At least if we do it, we're making an informed choice. They argued in whispers for another few minutes. But ultimately, they both knew there was only one decision they could make. They were scientists. When presented with an unknown, you investigated. You gathered data, you pushed forward into the mystery. Okay, Janelle said finally. We finished the pattern, but carefully, methodically, with every safeguard we can think of. They returned to Jim and Sarah. We'll do it, Wes said. Tell us what needs to be added. What followed was the strangest experience of Wes's life. Jim and Sarah guided them through the symbol chamber, showing them where gaps existed in the pattern, specific walls that needed specific symbols, connections that needed to be drawn. And as Wes began carving the symbols into the stone, using tools he didn't remember picking up, working with a precision he didn't know he possessed, he felt his consciousness expanding. He could see the layers now. Multiple versions of the canyon overlapping, existing simultaneously. In one layer, it was day. In another, night. In another, the canyon was flooded, full of water from an ancient sea. In another, it was winter. Snow dusting the red rocks. All of these versions occupying the same space, separated by infinitesimally thin boundaries. And he could see the watchers, the beings who'd been sending the message. They weren't in the canyon. They were outside it. Outside everything. Existing in a space that intersected with all the layers at once. They'd been trying to communicate for so long, sending their message across dimensions, hoping someone would receive it and understand. Janelle was working on another section of the chamber, her hands moving with that same unconscious precision. She was seeing it too. Wes could tell by the expression on her face. The wonder and fear mixing together. The pattern grew. Each symbol added, each connection made, brought them closer to completion. The other trapped researchers watched, their translucent forms becoming more solid as the pattern progressed. They'd been waiting for this. Waiting for someone to finish what they'd started. Hours passed, or days, or minutes. Time had no meaning in the chamber anymore. Wes's hands were covered in stone dust, his arms aching from the work. But he couldn't stop. The pattern demanded completion. The message needed to be received. Finally, Janelle carved the last symbol. A single circle, perfectly round, positioned at the exact center of the chamber floor. As soon as she finished it, everything changed. The symbols on all the walls began to glow brighter. That blue-green luminescence intensified, became almost blinding. The thrumming sound reached a crescendo, so loud it shook the chamber, sent rocks falling from above. And the air itself seemed to tear open. A doorway appeared. Not a physical door, more like a window, a view into somewhere else. Through it, Wes could see a landscape that wasn't Earth. Crystalline structures rising into a sky that was the wrong color. Beings moving in the distance, their forms strange but somehow familiar. The place looked ancient and advanced at the same time, like it had existed forever and would exist forever. One of the beings approached the doorway from the other side. Tall, luminous, proportioned wrong in that uncanny way Wes had seen before. It looked at him with dark, fathomless eyes. And then it spoke, not with sound, but directly into his mind. Thank you for completing the message, for opening the door. We have been trying to reach your kind for so long, trying to show you that there are more layers to reality than you perceive, more possibilities than you imagine. Why us? Wes asked. Why Red Canyon? This place is special, a natural weak point where dimensions overlap. Your ancestors knew this. They carved the first symbols here thousands of years ago, trying to communicate with us. We answered. The message has been building ever since, waiting for someone with the knowledge and willingness to complete it. What happens now? Janelle asked. Now you choose. You can step through, explore what lies beyond your limited reality. Or you can close the door, return to your world, and forget what you've learned here. Either way, the door is open. Others will find it. Your kind is ready to begin understanding the true nature of existence. Wes looked at Janelle, then at Jim and Sarah and the other researchers. They all had that same look. Hope mixed with fear. Curiosity mixed with caution. They'd been trapped for so long, working toward this moment. Now that it was here, what would they choose? "If we step through," Wes said, "can we come back?" "The door remains open. You can travel between layers as you wish, but you will be changed. You will see reality as we see it. All layers at once, all possibilities simultaneously. You cannot return to your previous limited perception." That was the real choice, Wes realized. Not just whether to explore the other side, but whether to accept a fundamental change in how he experienced existence. To give up the comfortable simplicity of seeing one layer, one timeline, one version of reality. "I need to think," he said. "Can you give us time?" "Time is not linear here. Take what you need." The being stepped back from the doorway, but didn't close it. The crystalline landscape remained visible, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Wes walked to the entrance crack. Needed to see the normal canyon, the normal world. Janelle followed. They squeezed through and emerged into the main canyon, and stopped. The canyon had returned to normal. The switchback trail was visible in the distance. The shadows were pointing in the correct direction. The rock formations were in their proper positions. Everything looked exactly as it should. "We can leave," Janelle said wonderingly. "The canyon is letting us go." "Because we completed the pattern," Wes realized. That was the condition. Finish the message and we're free to choose our path. They stood there for a long moment, looking at the trail that would lead them back to their vehicles, back to their jobs, back to their normal lives. It would be easy. They could walk away, file their reports, probably be reassigned to different projects. Life would continue as it had before. Except they would know. They would know what was in that chamber, what existed beyond the door, what possibilities lay waiting in those other layers of reality. "I don't think I can walk away," Janelle said quietly. "Not knowing what I know, I have to see, I have to understand. Even if it changes you? Especially if it changes me. That's what science is supposed to do, right? Change our understanding, transform our perception." Wes thought about Jim Carver, trapped in the canyon for 28 years. Thought about Sarah Bennett and all the others who'd given up their normal lives to work on this pattern. They'd been pioneers, whether they knew it or not. Opening a door that humanity had been trying to open for millennia. "Okay," he said. "We go through, but we document everything. We bring back information, and we make sure others can follow if they choose to." They returned to the chamber. Jim and Sarah were waiting, along with the other researchers. The doorway was still open, the crystalline landscape visible beyond. "We're going through," Wes announced. "All of us. We've earned the right to see what's on the other side." Jim smiled. The first real smile Wes had seen on his face. About time. "I've been waiting 3 decades for this." One by one they approached the doorway. Sarah went first, stepping through with no hesitation. The moment she crossed the threshold, her form became more solid, more real. She turned back and laughed, the sound clear and joyful. "It's incredible. Come see." The others followed. Jim paused at the doorway, looked back at Wes and Janelle. "Thank you for finishing what we couldn't, for having the courage we'd lost." Then he stepped through. Wes took Janelle's hand. "Ready?" "No, but let's do it anyway." They stepped through the doorway together. The sensation was like falling and flying at the same time. Wes's perception expanded, stretched, encompassed more than he thought possible. He could see all the layers now. Past, present, future, alternative timelines, parallel realities. He could see Earth from countless perspectives, could trace the threads of causality connecting every event, and he could see the beings who'd sent the message. Not aliens in the way humanity had imagined them. They were beyond that simple classification. They existed in multiple layers simultaneously, could perceive all states of matter and energy at once. They'd been trying to show humanity this perspective for so long, hoping to help them evolve beyond their limited single-layer existence. "Welcome," the luminous being said, "to the greater reality, to the truth that underlies everything. You are the first of many who will make this journey. The door is open now. Your kind can begin to grow." Wes looked at Janelle. She was glowing now, her form shifting between multiple states, solid and translucent, here and elsewhere. One person and infinite variations. She smiled at him, and he knew she was experiencing the same expansion of awareness. "What do we do now?" he asked the being. "Now you learn, and then you teach. You are bridges between the layers. You will help others understand what you've discovered. The symbols were just the beginning, a way to open the door. But the real work is helping humanity learn to perceive all that exists." They stayed in that other place, if it could be called a place, for what felt like years, learning from the beings who'd sent the message, understanding the physics of multiple realities, developing the ability to move between layers at will, and eventually they returned to Red Canyon, stepped back through the doorway, back into the symbol chamber. But they were changed, transformed. They could see the layers now, could perceive the true nature of reality that most people remained blind to. The chamber looked different to their expanded perception. The symbols weren't just carvings anymore. They were living things, pulsing with meaning, connecting to every other pattern throughout the canyon and beyond. The entire landscape was alive with information, with possibilities, with connections. Jim and Sarah returned with them, along with the other researchers. They'd all been transformed, all gained the ability to exist in multiple layers. "What now?" Sarah asked. "Do we go back to our old lives?" "I don't think we can," Wes said. "We're different now. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to be different, to help others through the door when they're ready." They emerged from the chamber into the canyon. It was late afternoon, or maybe it was morning, or midnight, or all times at once. With their expanded perception, Wes could see all the temporal layers overlapping, but one layer showed the present moment in linear time. The moment when their vehicles were still parked at the canyon rim, when rescue teams were probably being organized to search for them. They'd been gone for 3 days in normal time, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. "We should report back," Janelle said. "Let people know we're alive, and then we start the real work, helping others understand what we've learned." They hiked back to the canyon rim, moving through the layers with ease now. Their shadows no longer confused them. They could see why the shadows had been moving. They'd been showing the overlap between different temporal states, different versions of reality bleeding through. At the rim, they found Marshall Tate, the park ranger Elena Brooks had worked with. He was coordinating a search effort, looking worried and exhausted. "Wes, Janelle, thank God. We've been looking for you for days. What happened?" How could they explain? How could they possibly put into words what they'd experienced? "We got lost," Wes said simply, "but we found our way back." Marshall looked at them closely. Something in his expression suggested he saw more than they were saying. Elena mentioned phenomena, unusual events in the canyon. "Did you experience anything like that?" "Yes," Janelle said. "We experienced something, and we documented it, but, Marshall, it's going to take time to explain. time and trust. This isn't something that fits into a standard USGS report. I believe you, Marshall said. After what happened with Elena, I believe anything is possible in this canyon. He gestured to their equipment. Did you get any useful data? Wes and Janelle looked at each other. They had more than data. They had transformation. They had knowledge. They had the ability to perceive reality in ways most humans couldn't imagine. We got everything we needed, Wes said, and more. As they packed up their equipment and prepared to leave Red Canyon, Wes took one last look at the landscape. He could see it now in all its layers, past and present and future, solid and permeable, known and unknowable. The canyon was a doorway, and they'd walk through it. Others would follow. The symbols would continue to accumulate. The pattern would continue to grow, and eventually humanity would make the collective choice to expand their perception. To see the greater reality that had always been there, waiting. Wes pulled out his notebook one last time. The pages were filled with symbols, circles and vertical lines and patterns he now understood. He added one more symbol to the last page, not part of the message, just his own mark. His signature on a work that had taken countless people countless years to complete. A single circle, perfectly round, unbroken. The door was open. The journey had begun. And somewhere in the red rocks of the canyon, in that symbol chamber that existed in multiple layers at once, the patterns continued to pulse with blue-green light, waiting for the next person ready to see, ready to understand, ready to step through. The shadows in Red Canyon would continue to move in impossible ways. The lights would continue to appear in the night sky. And those brave enough to investigate, those curious enough to question, those willing enough to be transformed, they would find their way to the chamber. They would add their symbols to the pattern. They would open the door and step through, because that's what humanity does. When presented with a mystery, with an invitation, with a door, we walk through it, even if we don't know what's on the other side, especially if we don't know. The call came through at 11:47 p.m. on October 19th. Abel Rowan had been a search and rescue coordinator for Kane County, Utah for 12 years, but this call was different. The voice was shaking. Male, 30s, trying to stay calm but failing. I need help, I'm lost, I don't know where I am. Abel checked the dispatch screen. Sir, I'm showing you on Highway 89, about 3 miles south of the Paria River crossing. Is that correct? I don't know. Nothing looks right. I was just driving home from Kanab, and then everything shifted. Sir, what's your name? Reed Donovan. Okay, Reed, I'm Abel Rowan, search and rescue. Stay with your vehicle. What are you driving? Blue Toyota Tacoma. But Abel, there was a light in the sky. It wasn't a plane. It was just floating there, and then he cut off. Reed, you still there? Silence, then. It's back. The light is back. Oh God, it's coming closer. It's right above me now. The line went dead. Abel tried calling back. No answer. He radioed dispatch, confirmed Reed's coordinates, and started driving. 23 minutes later, he found the blue Tacoma sitting in the middle of an old mining road. Doors closed. Headlights on, engine running, but no sign of Reed. Abel parked 20 feet back and stepped out. The October night was cold. He approached the Tacoma carefully. Reed? Reed Donovan? It's Abel Rowan, search and rescue. No response. The vehicle was empty. Keys in the ignition, cell phone on the passenger seat, wallet in the cup holder, half-finished coffee still warm. Abel touched the hood. Hot. Very hot. He popped the hood release. When he lifted it, cold air rolled out. Frost was forming on the engine block, crystallizing in his flashlight beam. The engine was running, but it was frozen. The radiator, the hoses, the battery, all cold enough to form ice, but the hood was still hot to the touch, maybe 120 degrees, which made no sense. "Reed!" Abel swept his flashlight across the area. Movement near a cluster of boulders. Reed Donovan, stumbling, looking dazed. "Reed, are you injured?" Reed turned toward the light, squinting. Pale, eyes unfocused. Dirt on his clothes, scrapes on his hands. "Abel?" "Yeah. What happened?" Reed looked around like seeing the location for the first time. "I don't know. I was in my truck. The light was above me. And then I don't remember." Abel checked him over. No major injuries, but pupils dilated, hands shaking, skin cold. Possible shock. "Sit in my vehicle. Heat's running." While Reed settled into Abel's SUV, Abel examined the Tacoma. He photographed the frosted engine, the hot hood. Then he noticed something else. The roof was dented. 4 distinct impressions, each about the size of a fist, arranged like finger marks, like something had grabbed it from above, gripping hard enough to deform the metal. Abel took several photos. These dents were too precise, too deliberate. Whatever had made them had applied significant force. He returned to Reed. "Walk me through what happened. Start from when you left Kanab." Reed took a shaky breath. "I was driving home to Panguitch. Around 11:30 I saw a light in the sky. At first I thought it was a plane, but it wasn't moving right. Too slow, too bright. Like a spotlight, but no helicopter." "What did it do?" "It hovered. Maybe 100 feet up. Then it started moving, gliding, smooth, no sound. It stopped right above the road." Abel took notes. "And then?" "I stopped the truck. I got out. I walked toward it. Maybe 50 feet. The light was so bright it hurt, but I couldn't look away. That's when I realized there was something solid behind it. A shape. Big, metallic. Like 2 dishes stacked rim to rim. Classic saucer shape." "What happened next?" "It descended. Maybe 30 feet above the ground. Then I felt this pulling sensation. Pressure in my head. Like something was inside my mind. And I heard a voice inside my thoughts. It said, 'Do not be afraid. This is observation only.'" "Observation of what?" "I don't know. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was frozen, then I felt heat. Intense heat, like standing next to a furnace. From above, from the craft. My skin felt like it was burning." That would explain the hot hood, Abel thought. "How long were you frozen?" "I don't know. I lost time. One moment I was standing there, and the next I was behind those boulders. The craft was gone. My truck was in the middle of the road, and I was so cold." Abel processed this. The frozen engine, the hot hood, the dents, Reed's missing time. None of it made sense, but all of it was consistent with Reed's account. "Reed, your truck has anomalies. The hood is hot, but the engine is frozen. There's ice forming on the engine block. And your roof has 4 dents that look like something grabbed it from above." Reed shook his head. "When I was frozen, when I felt that presence, I also felt contact, like something touched the truck, but I couldn't see what." Abel radioed dispatch, then pulled out his personal camera to document everything. He photographed the roof dents from multiple angles, measured them. Evenly spaced, about 4 inches apart. Each roughly circular, 3 inches in diameter, depressed an inch into the metal. He photographed the engine. Stuck a thermometer in, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Measured the hood with an infrared thermometer, 118 degrees. Impossible. He searched the ground. No footprints except Reed's and his own. But directly under where the truck was parked, the dirt was scorched, like something very hot had been suspended above it. The scorched area was roughly circular, about 15 feet in diameter. Abel took photos, collected a soil sample, then returned to Reed. "We need to get you to the clinic, and we need to get your truck towed." They waited for the tow truck. While waiting, Abel called his supervisor, Patricia Green. "Patricia, I've got a situation. I need you to hear me out." He explained everything. When he finished, there was silence. "You're sure about the engine temperature?" Patricia asked. "I measured it, 38 degrees, while running." "That's not possible." "I know, but it's real. I have photos, thermometer readings, witness testimony." Another silence. "Bring Reed to the clinic. File your report with full detail. I'll make calls." "This isn't the first time we've had unusual reports from that area." "What do you mean?" "Later. After you get Reed taken care of." The tow truck arrived at 1:30 a.m. The driver, a guy named Marcus, who Abel had worked with before, took one look at the Tacoma and whistled. "What happened to the roof?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Abel said. "Can you tow it to the impound lot? It needs to be examined." "Sure thing." Marcus walked around the truck, checking the tow points. Then he opened the hood and jumped back. "Holy hell, why is there ice in the engine?" "Good question." Marcus looked at Abel, then at the ice, then back at Abel. "You know, this is impossible, right? The engine's running, it should be hot." "I know. So what happened?" "I honestly don't know, but I need you to tow it carefully and not let anyone else touch it until it can be properly examined." Marcus agreed, though he kept shooting confused glances at the truck as he hooked it up. While he worked, Abel took Reed back to town, drove him to the small urgent care clinic that served the rural area. The doctor on duty, Dr. Sarah Kemper, examined Reed thoroughly. No major injuries, but his core body temperature was low, 94.8 degrees, and he had signs of mild hypothermia. She started IV fluids, wrapped him in warming blankets, and asked what had happened. "I got cold," Reed said, which wasn't technically a lie. Dr. Kemper looked at Abel. "He's stable, but I want to keep him here for a few hours. Monitor his temperature, make sure there's no underlying issues." While Reed was being treated, Abel went to the impound lot to check on the Tacoma. Marcus had it parked under the covered area, hood still open. Abel approached cautiously. The ice had melted. The engine block was now warm, functioning normally. The hood was cooling down to normal temperatures, but the dents were still there. 4 precise impressions in the roof, arranged like fingerprints of something much larger than a human hand. Abel climbed up on a ladder to examine them more closely. Each dent had a strange texture inside it. Not just crushed metal, but metal that looked almost melted and then resolidified, like whatever had grabbed the roof had been hot enough to partially liquefy the steel. He took more photos, more measurements, documented everything he could. And as the eastern sky started to lighten with the approaching dawn, Abel realized he was documenting something that would change how he understood the world. Whether anyone believed him or not, whether this made it into any official record or got buried and forgotten, he knew what he'd seen. Something had been out there in the Utah desert. Something that could hover silently, radiate intense heat, freeze an engine while keeping the hood hot, leave dents in steel, and communicate telepathically with at least one human. Something that defied explanation. Abel returned to the clinic at 6 a.m. Reed was awake. Temperature back to normal, looking exhausted but stable. Dr. Kemper had cleared him to go home as long as someone drove him. "I'll take you," Abel offered. "Your truck needs to stay in impound for now. There'll be an investigation." Reed nodded tiredly. "Will they believe me when they investigate? Will they believe any of this? I don't know, but I believe you." I saw the evidence. I documented it. Whatever happens next, you're not alone in this." They drove in silence for a while. Then Reed asked, "Have you ever heard of anything like this before? In your work?" Abel thought about Patricia's comment, about other unusual reports from the area. "Not exactly like this, but I've heard stories. Lights in the sky, time distortions, people finding themselves somewhere they shouldn't be with no memory of how they got there. Most of it gets dismissed, explained away as confusion or hallucination or hoaxes, but some of it," he trailed off. "Some of it is real," Reed finished. "Yeah, I think some of it is real." Abel dropped Reed off at his house in Panguitch around 7:30 a.m. Reed lived alone in a small ranch-style place on the edge of town with a view of the red cliffs that surrounded the area. Before Reed got out of the vehicle, he turned to Abel. "What do I tell people? My job, my family, people are going to ask what happened. Do I tell them the truth?" Abel considered that. "Tell them you had car trouble, got disoriented in the dark, experienced some mild hypothermia. All of that is true. Whether you tell them about the craft and the voice, that's up to you. But be prepared for people not to believe you. Will your report include everything I told you? Every detail. It's my job to document what I observe and what witnesses report. What anyone does with that information is beyond my control." Reed nodded and got out. Abel watched him walk to his front door, moving slowly, like every step took effort. Then Abel drove back to the search and rescue office to write his report. Patricia was waiting for him. She had coffee brewing and a serious expression on her face. "Before you start writing that report, I need to show you something." She led Abel to a back office he rarely used. Technically, it was for storage, but Patricia had set up a laptop on one of the old desks. She pulled up a folder labeled Anomalous Incidents. "This doesn't officially exist," she said. "It's not part of our regular database, but over the years I've been keeping track of calls and incidents that don't fit normal patterns. Incidents like what you dealt with last night." She opened a file dated 3 years earlier. May 2020. Hiker named Michelle Torres called in. Said she was lost on the White Cliffs Trail. But when we found her, she was 15 miles from where her GPS showed her location. No way she could have walked that far in the time she'd been missing. She had no memory of the journey, but she had burns on her arms. Second-degree, symmetrical patterns. Medical examiner said they looked like someone had held her arms, and the heat had come from their hands. Patricia opened another file. September 2019. Family camping near coral pink sand dunes. 4 people, including 2 kids. They called in the middle of the night saying their campsite was surrounded by lights. When rangers got there 3 hours later, the family was fine, but their watch batteries were all dead. Car battery was dead. Every electronic device they had was completely drained, and the sand around their campsite had fused into glass in a perfect circle. "Fused how?" Abel asked. "Heat, extreme heat, the kind you'd need a forge to produce. But there was no fire, no burning smell, nothing except glass where sand should be." She opened a third file. December 2018. Truck driver on Highway 89, same stretch where you found Reed last night. He called saying his truck stopped working, engine just died. When we got there, the entire electrical system had been fried. Not shorted out, fried. Like it had been hit by an EMP, and the driver said he'd seen a large dark object pass overhead right before the truck died. Patricia closed the laptop and looked at Abel. "I have 47 incidents in this database. 47 cases over the last 15 years that have elements that don't make sense. Lights in the sky, missing time, impossible physical effects. Witnesses who are credible, sane, sober, but who report things that shouldn't be possible. Why isn't this public? Why isn't this being investigated? Oh, it's being investigated, just not by us. 3 times in the past 10 years, people have shown up after these incidents. Federal agents usually, sometimes military. They interview the witnesses, examine the evidence, take samples. Then they classify everything and make it disappear. The official reports get rewritten to remove the anomalous details. The witnesses get debriefed and strongly encouraged to keep quiet. Abel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Are you saying there's a cover-up? I'm saying there's a pattern. These incidents happen, they get documented, and then they get buried. I don't know if it's a cover-up or just bureaucratic inertia or something else, but I know that witnesses who talk publicly about what they experienced tend to have their credibility attacked. Their lives get difficult, so most of them stay quiet. What about the physical evidence? The dents in Reed's truck, the frozen engine, the scorched ground. Document it, photograph it, collect samples, but don't be surprised if it disappears. The Tacoma will probably be returned to Reed with some explanation about engine malfunction and hail damage. The soil samples will get lost in analysis, and your report will get filed in a database where no one will ever look at it. Abel sat down heavily. So, what's the point? Why document any of this if it's just going to be ignored? Because someday, someone might start paying attention. Maybe when there's enough evidence, enough witnesses, enough incidents that can't be explained away. Maybe then the truth comes out. Until then, we do our job. We document. We preserve the evidence. We support the witnesses. Patricia put a hand on Abel's shoulder. And we know that what they're experiencing is real, even if the world isn't ready to acknowledge it. Abel spent the rest of the morning writing his report. He included everything, every detail of the call, the location, the condition of the truck, Reed's testimony, the measurements, the photographs. He wrote in clear, factual language, avoiding speculation but not hiding anything he'd observed. When he finished, Patricia read it over. Good work. Complete, thorough, unbiased. Now make 3 copies, 1 for official records, 1 for my anomalous incidents folder, and 1 for yourself. Keep that last one somewhere safe. You really think someone will try to bury this? I think Reed Donovan's experience last night falls into a category that makes certain people uncomfortable. And uncomfortable people tend to make evidence disappear. Abel made the copies and filed his report. Then he drove back to the impound lot to check on the Tacoma again. A man he didn't recognize was examining the truck, taking photos with professional equipment. He wore a dark suit, had federal agent written all over him. Can I help you? Abel asked. The man turned, showing a badge. Agent Thomas Brewer, Department of Energy. I'm here to examine a vehicle involved in an unusual incident. Department of Energy? Why would DOE be interested in a search and rescue case? The vehicle's electrical system shows signs of electromagnetic interference. We investigate such incidents as part of our monitoring of potential security threats. Brewer's tone was polite but firm. I understand you were the responding coordinator. That's right, Abel Rowan. Can you walk me through what you observed? Abel repeated his account, the call from Reed, finding the truck, the frozen engine and hot hood, the dents in the roof. He kept his tone neutral, factual, the same way he'd written his report. Brewer listened without interrupting. Then he examined the roof dents, running his fingers over the melted-looking metal. Interesting. What does the witness say caused these? He doesn't remember. He reported seeing an unidentified aerial phenomenon, experiencing missing time, and finding himself disoriented near his vehicle. Unidentified aerial phenomenon, You mean a UFO? Abel held Brewer's gaze. I mean what I said, something in the air that he couldn't identify. I'm not making interpretations beyond what I observed and what the witness reported. Brewer smiled slightly. Smart. Stick to the facts, avoid conclusions. Good policy. He walked around the truck again, taking more photos. The engine damage is consistent with exposure to an electromagnetic pulse. The roof dents are more difficult to explain with conventional physics. And the temperature differential you documented is unusual. Unusual how? In ways that don't fit standard thermodynamic models. But I'm sure there's a rational explanation. There always is. Brewer closed his camera and pulled out a business card. If you remember any additional details, or if the witness remembers anything else, contact me at this number. This incident will be classified as part of an ongoing investigation into atmospheric anomalies. Atmospheric anomalies? That's the official terminology. Easier than writing unexplained weird stuff in government reports. Brewer almost smiled again. Between you and me, Mr. Rowan, I've been investigating atmospheric anomalies for 15 years. I've seen things that don't fit into the textbooks. Most of it gets explained away, some of it doesn't. This case, he gestured at the Tacoma. This case doesn't, but officially it will. Officially, Mr. Donovan experienced engine failure and mild hypothermia. The roof damage is from hail. The temperature readings are instrument error. Understand? I understand what you're telling me. I don't agree with it. You don't have to agree. You just have to accept it. Because that's what the official report will say. And arguing won't change anything except make your life harder. Brewer handed Abel the business card. But if something like this happens again, and statistically in this area it probably will, call me. I'm one of the few people in the government who actually wants to know the truth. Brewer left, driving away in a black SUV with the government plates. Abel stood alone in the impound lot, looking at the Tacoma, wondering how something so clearly anomalous could be officially explained away. His phone rang. Reed Donovan. Abel, something's happening. I need you to come to my house, please, right now. What's wrong? I'm remembering things from last night, things I didn't remember before, and I'm seeing. Reed's voice dropped. I'm seeing things that aren't there, or maybe they are there. And I couldn't see them before, just please come. Abel drove fast back to Panguitch. When he arrived at Reed's house, Reed was standing in his driveway staring at his hands. Reed, what's going on? Reed looked up. His eyes were different, wider, more focused, like he was seeing things at a different wavelength. It changed me, last night. Whatever that craft did, whatever that voice was in my head, it changed something. I can see things now. See what things? Reed held up his hands. They looked normal to Abel, just regular human hands, but Reed was staring at them like they were alien artifacts. Energy. I can see energy moving through my body, through everything. It's like the world is made of light and pattern, and before last night I could only see the surface, but now I can see deeper. This was concerning. Abel had seen people go through traumatic experiences and come out changed. Sometimes that change was psychological. PTSD, anxiety, altered perception. But Reed didn't seem unstable. He seemed disturbed, yes, but also oddly calm, like he was trying to explain something real that he lacked the vocabulary to describe. Can you see this energy in other things? Not just your body? Reed looked around, at the trees, the rocks, Abel's vehicle. Yes, everything's glowing, everything's connected by these threads of light. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Let's go inside, talk this through. They sat in Reed's living room. Reed kept looking around, clearly seeing things Abel couldn't. "The craft last night," Reed said. "When it was above me, when I felt that presence in my mind, it was scanning me. I felt it, like someone running their hands over my brain, mapping it. And now, I think it left something behind, not physical, mental, a way of perceiving that humans don't normally have. Why would it do that? I don't know. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was intentional. The voice said observation only, but maybe the observation process itself changes the observed. Like quantum mechanics. The act of measuring changes what you're measuring." Abel made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called Agent Brewer's number. "This is Abel Rowan. I have Reed Donovan here. He's experiencing unusual, perceptual changes following last night's incident. I think you should talk to him." Brewer arrived an hour later. He brought a medical kit and what looked like scanning equipment. He listened to Reed's description of seeing energy patterns, made notes, didn't dismiss anything. "Mr. Donovan," Brewer said carefully, "what you're describing sounds like a form of synesthesia combined with enhanced visual processing. Some people who've experienced close encounters with UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, report similar perceptual changes, usually temporary, sometimes permanent. What causes it? We don't know. Best theory is that the electromagnetic fields associated with these craft can affect brain chemistry, specifically the visual cortex and the areas responsible for processing sensory information. It's like your brain got rewired slightly. Can you fix it? Do you want it fixed, or do you want to understand it?" Reed considered that. Understand it. If this is real, if I'm really seeing something that's actually there, I want to know what it means. Brewer pulled out a device that looked like a small metal sphere. "Hold this." He handed it to Reed. Reed took it, then gasped. "It's glowing, brighter than anything else. The whole surface is covered in patterns. Circuits, maybe, or writing. I can't read it, but it's definitely intentional." "What is this?" "A detector," Brewer said quietly. "It measures exotic energy signatures, and it's not glowing. At least, not in the visual spectrum. The fact that you can see it glowing means you're perceiving something beyond normal human vision." He looked at Abel. "This is significant. Very significant. Mr. Donovan, I'm going to ask you to come with me for some tests. Voluntary, fully compensated, completely confidential. We need to understand what's happened to you." Reed looked at Abel. "Should I?" Abel wanted to say no. Wanted to tell Reed to refuse, to stay away from government agents and secret tests, but he also knew that Reed needed answers, needed to understand what was happening to him. "It's your choice," Abel said. "But if you go, I'm going with you, as an observer, to make sure everything's legitimate." Brewer nodded. "Fair enough. We have a facility about 3 hours from here. We can do a full workup, maybe help Mr. Donovan understand and control his new perceptions." They drove together in Brewer's SUV. The facility turned out to be a nondescript building outside of Cedar City, marked only with a number. Inside, it was surprisingly normal. Medical examining rooms, testing equipment, computers, not the sinister government laboratory Abel had half expected. Reed underwent a series of tests, visual acuity, brain scans, electromagnetic sensitivity assessments. Throughout it all, he kept describing what he saw. Patterns of energy flowing through the equipment, through the technicians, through the walls themselves. Finally, a woman in a white coat came to talk to them. Dr. Lisa Hartman, neurologist. "Mr. Donovan, your brain scans show unusual activity in your visual cortex and pineal gland. Nothing dangerous, but definitely anomalous. You appear to have developed the ability to perceive electromagnetic fields in the visible spectrum. Essentially, you're seeing radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet, frequencies that normally invisible to humans. How is that possible? Reed asked. We think the electromagnetic pulse from the craft last night affected your pineal gland. That's the part of the brain some people call the third eye. It regulates circadian rhythms, produces melatonin, and in some animals can detect magnetic fields. Humans have a vestigial version of this ability, but in you it seems to have been activated. Can I control it? Turn it off when I don't want to see all this? With training, possibly. It's a skill like any other perception. You'll need to learn to filter, to focus, to choose what you pay attention to. We can help with that. Reed looked relieved. So I'm not going crazy. This is real. This is very real. And you're not alone. We have records of 17 other individuals who developed similar abilities following close encounters with UAPs. Most of them learned to adapt, to use their enhanced perception. Some even found it valuable. They could detect things others couldn't. Electrical problems, gas leaks, even medical conditions that gave off unusual electromagnetic signatures. What about me? Reed asked. What do I do now? Dr. Hartman pulled out a folder. We'd like to offer you enrollment in a study, ongoing monitoring of your condition, training to help you control your perceptions, and compensation for your time. Everything we learn from you could help us understand these phenomena better. Reed looked at Abel. What do you think? Abel thought about Patricia's warning, about evidence disappearing, witnesses being silenced. But he also saw the genuine curiosity in Dr. Hartman's eyes, the scientific interest rather than government cover-up mentality. I think you should do what feels right for you, Abel said. But stay in touch with me. Let me know if anything doesn't feel legitimate. Reed agreed to the study, signed paperwork, got a schedule for follow-up appointments. And through it all, he kept describing the energy patterns he saw, the flowing lights, the connections between everything. As they were leaving, Brewer pulled Abel aside. Thank you for bringing him in, for trusting us. I know you probably think we're part of some conspiracy to hide the truth. But that's not what this is. This is us trying to understand something that challenges everything we know about physics and consciousness. What do you think these craft are? Abel asked. Where do they come from? I don't know. We've been documenting encounters for decades, collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, trying to find patterns. Some of my colleagues think they're extraterrestrial. Others think they're interdimensional. Some think they're time travelers. Maybe they're all of those things. Maybe they're none of them, but they're real. That much I can tell you with certainty. Abel drove back to Kane County alone. It was late afternoon, the sun turning the red rocks golden. He thought about everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. About Reed's experience, the frozen engine, the hot hood, the dents in the roof. About Patricia's database of anomalous incidents. About Reed's new ability to see electromagnetic fields. The world was stranger than most people knew. Stranger than most people wanted to know. But Abel had seen the evidence. He'd documented it. And whatever happened next, whether the official reports buried the truth or whether someday the truth emerged, he would know what was real. He filed his final report with Patricia, added his notes and observations to her anomalous incidents database, and kept his own copies locked away safely, because someday someone would want to know what really happened in Utah on the night of October 19th. Someday, someone would ask about File 77, the case of Reed Donovan and the craft that changed him. And when that day came, Abel would be ready. With evidence, with documentation, with the truth preserved. Until then, he'd keep doing his job. Responding to calls, helping people in distress, and watching the night sky over Utah's red rock country, knowing that sometimes what people saw up there was more than just stars. Sometimes it was something else entirely.